I'd like first of all to welcome members of the committee, officers and members of the public to this meeting, which is being webcast. So welcome also to anyone who's watching or listening online. We've just heard what the emergency alarm sounds like. That was a test. If it sounds again, it won't be. So please leave the room calmly via the lobby where you came in, down the ramp outside the front door, and assemble in front of the cathedral. Right, I'm going to first of all introduce myself and then ask members of the committee to introduce themselves as well. So my name's Councillor Barry Parsons. I am local councillor for Easton and I'm chair of this committee. And I'm going to hand over now to Sibs, please.
Councillor Shabalala for Central Ward.
Councillor Lisa Stone for Windmill Hill and Totterdown.
And just joining us we have... Thank you, Karen.
Kerry Bells, Hartcliffe and Withywood.
Thanks very much. And yeah, just a reminder to everybody, members of the committee and officers, that please, if you're speaking, switch on your microphones and speak into the mic so that not only people here, but also people listening at home can hear you. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence and substitutions. We've received apologies today from Councillor Paul Goggin and Councillor Richard Eddy. Councillor Kerry Bales is substituting for Councillor Goggin. Do we have any more apologies? Or can we assume that because we had a late budget meeting last night, some members of this committee might be a little bit late this morning? Okay, I'm not seeing any further apologies, so let's move on to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest. So this is the point at which I need to ask committee members, do you have any interest to declare in relation to any of the items of business on today's agenda? No? Great. Let's move on then. Agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. Now, there's one set of minutes to be approved, which is from the meeting held on Friday the 19th of December. However, those minutes were only published very recently. So what I'd like to ask the committee is, are you happy to approve those minutes today, or do you need some more time to review them and then we can approve them at the next meeting? Councillor Stone.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because I noticed that the minutes, why were they so late in coming? And I would like to also defer it later on.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Yeah, apologies everyone, that was an administrative error, but let's do that then. We'll review those and we'll look to approve them at our next meeting. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 5 is Chair's announcements. So we've got some changes within the Housing Directorate. We have a new Executive Director for Housing has been recently appointed, David McNulty. He's going to be starting on the 16th of March. And we also have a new Director of Property, Sian Humphreys, who is joining us today. So welcome, Sian, and thank you. I'd also like to mention that members of this committee, along with other members, had a work programme setting workshop a couple of weeks ago. And the purpose of that is to set the work programme for this committee for the next 6 months. And in some cases beyond. We had a really full discussion of the agenda for this committee and what's going to be coming up over the next few months. Members as well as officers had the opportunity to feed in suggestions for work, business that we want to undertake. And we're going to be hearing a full follow-up report on that at our next committee meeting in April. I'd also like to report that, as members will be very aware, last night we approved the 26-27 council budget, which includes the general fund element of our housing services, but also the housing revenue account budget. So congratulations, everyone, and thank you for everyone who contributed to that process. It's the setting of a budget is a incredibly complex, detailed piece of work that involves many hours of input, both by officers and by members. So thank you all. Agenda item 6 is public forum. Up to 30 minutes are available for the public forum. Questions and replies have been circulated both to committee members as well as being published on the website in advance of this meeting. Now, according to usual practice, each questioner is permitted to ask up to 2 oral supplementary questions, which must arise directly out of the original question or the reply. If we aren't able to reply in full verbally here, then it may be necessary for us to follow up in writing. Since we only have one person who's indicated their attendance for public forum today, and as I say, we've got up to 30 minutes. I'm going to use a bit of discretion. Going to be a bit flexible on this, so let's go to our public forum questioner, Dan Aykroyd. So
Hi there.
Dan, I understand from our conversation outside that you had some there were some issues with the questions that you received in the first place. So I think, could you draw attention to anything that you think was missed in our original questions, original responses, and then you can also ask follow-ups based on those.
Yeah, so it was question 11, which is about the urgent spending, where the amount of money spent on the IT project was increased late last year. There's not, basically I was asking for details of what that money was for, and there's not really any details in the answer at all, other than we needed to spend more money on the IT project. So I was like, can I have some actual details of what the money was spent on and why it needed to be taken as an urgent decision?
That's great. Thanks very much, Dan. So we've got a number of officers in the room today who hopefully will be able to support with answering those questions. In particular, we have Charles, who's been deeply involved with running the IT transformation program. Who would be best placed to answer that question? Would it be you, Charles?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Right, just to give you some clarity, I joined Bristol to help provide assurance and an overview on the HTT programme in June 25. And what we have been doing is obviously bringing the project on track and so on. So to answer your question, one of the things I raised in June as such was the original programme delivery of 7.5 million was personally woefully under budget for a project of this size. From 35 years experience working in local authorities, housing associations, for a project of this size and complexity, you would normally be looking at a budget of about £10 million. So that budget assessment done in February 2023 was too low for the complexity and size of this project. In relation to the question in relation to what that additional funding has been for, that is basically to cover extra work that we've had to require NEC to do, but it's mainly regards to extra resourcing, support and staff and so on. I could go into a lot of other reasons why the more money has been required. If you want me to, Councillor, I don't know, but basically the original budget was woefully too low in the first place for an organisation of this size and complexity.
Okay, thanks very much, Charles. Dan, would you like to...
Can I just follow up on that? And just,
yeah.
What was the reason for the urgency? I mean, I understand that, I fully understand that the original projection was perhaps not complete, but how did that come as such a sudden surprise that it required an urgent decision?
where we were with the project in relation to completing the delivery. So NEC went live in October, and then obviously we had to complete other areas of housing options and housing support register coming out later this year. So it would not be able to continue to deliver the project on the finances that were available at that time. So more money was required to complete the project. And we are in a much better position now with a system that's fully functional, working, reporting, etc. But it wasn't, you couldn't have carried on without that budget enhancement.
Okay. Thanks, Charles. Fiona, did you want to add to that response?
Thank you. Yeah, I think in terms of the urgency, I think I wanted to just add, I think we got to a position whereby we understood that in order, once we'd analysed what needed to be completed in order to get us over the line, we recognised that we would need to spend far more money, which is why that budget request became urgent to stay within requirements.
And I think I'd add from my point of view as well, it's clearly not a situation that we want to be in. We don't want to be bringing urgent decisions to committee retrospectively, as it were. But although I think the committee system is, and our governance system is generally pretty robust, it's not always the sort of fleetest of foot. And one of the challenges that we do have occasionally is that the decision pathway to get a paper to committee can add time that we don't have to decision making. And I think that's unfortunately what happened here.
About the about my question 10, which was the issue tracking. I guess this might be a slightly two-parter. I was trying to understand how much more of the phase 1 work there is left to do. So I couldn't actually see a clear answer to that. But specifically also, part of the answer read, a quirk in the system setup is being addressed directly with NEC. Options to resolve will be fed back through to the HIT board. If you're having to talk to NEC directly, that sounds like a non-trivial issue to solve. So what's the nature of the quirk, and is it correct to say that we're just about at the end of phase 1?
Thanks, Dan. Charles?
Hi. Right. Phase 1 is there in relation to completion now that housing options live. We are dealing with what we would call post-go live issues. Any project normally has post-go live issues. Because of some of the decisions made going back to 2023, we've had to try and unpick some of those decisions, and that's why we've had some issues going forward. But generally, phase 1 is complete, housing options is live, we've done 4 or 5 shortlisting processes now, so everything is done as expected. We are entering into a business as usual phase with regards to upgrades and so on. We obviously have stage 1.2, which we can talk about later if necessary with regards to what's coming, but it is done. I think there has been a lot of issues going on in relation to like repairs and clearing old jobs, and that has been done as we speak and so on, but systematically the system is working and everything is okay. I think one of the things I would add here, not now but at the appropriate time, Bristol can learn a lot from this project in relation to, I don't like always saying lessons learned, but there's certain things they can learn for future IT projects going forward. And I would say there is a complete commitment to get everything done, but there are certain decisions made 2-3 years ago which have really caused problems. And one of those key things was Bristol wanted a system to suit them, but they didn't want a system that everyone else had in relation to NEC. And by calling it Bristolisation, as such we call it, you created more and more problems which you wouldn't have had. So if you'd had the standard package, which 50, 60 other housing associations, local authorities have with NEC, we probably wouldn't be here today in relation to some of the issues. So going forward, we aren't Bristolising anything anymore. We are taking it exactly out of the box, and we're getting things implemented a lot quicker.
Thanks. Dan?
This is regarding the sudden increase in the number of homes that are failing to make meet the decent home standard. I read in one of the answers that this was due to a processing error in the Keystone system. So I was wondering, first of all, can I have a bit more explanation on the exact nature of that change in reporting? But also, we're at 50% stock surveys done, and the decent homes standard has dropped from 90% to 70%. When we do the other 50% of stock surveys, is that decent homes standard going to be dropped down to 50%, or is it going to stabilise at 70%?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think there's two elements as you've picked out to this. One is the change in the methodology and the calculation within the decent home standard between the two systems. I've not got to hand the absolute detail of the calculations, but we can certainly provide that afterwards to show how that calculation was assessed differently. But ultimately, the previous system, so the CX system, didn't capture some areas of non-decency, I think to do with energy efficiency mainly, within their calculation, which is identified more robustly within the new system. If required, we can give more detail about exactly the numbers and how that stacks up, if that would be helpful. Probably put that in a table that demonstrates that.
Yeah, can we do that, please?
The other part of the question around stock condition surveys is, yes, the stock condition surveys have also had an impact on the decency figure. We did anticipate that the decency figure would drop. We've been having discussions with the regulator of social housing for a little while, saying that we weren't confident in that figure because of our lack of data on our homes. So we did expect it to reduce. We feel probably around the 70% is more realistic. We don't expect it to drop to anything like 50%. I think based on where we are with the stock data at the moment, I would anticipate that figure would stabilise at this point, if not rise slightly. But I've not got a crystal ball, but that's just my assumption of where we are at the moment. I don't expect it to continue to drop as it has done.
Thanks. I think, Sean, did you indicate that you wanted to add to that, or has Richard covered everything? Okay, great, thanks. Dan, did you have further follow-up?
Got one more, and this one might be more controversial. So I have a supplementary about the question for statement of arrangements for consultant people. I understand that Bristol City Council doesn't consider that the consultation was needed, but still, under Section 137 of the Housing Act 1996 and Section 105 of the Housing Act 1985, there is a requirement to publish details of how the council will consult people. Where is that statement of arrangements published?
Thanks for your question, Dan. I'm not sure I know where that is published. Does anyone here have any information about that? I think we might have to go away and look at that. But I think Fiona would like to come in on the points about whether or not consultation is required for certain pieces of work.
So just for clarity, I was trying to clarify, and perhaps you can answer, Dan, if that's possible. So we're talking about the work that we did in terms of the transformational IT programme. So when you talk about transformation, we're talking about the IT change programme?
A specific programme. I'm talking about the Section 137 of the Housing Act 1996 and Section 105 of the Housing Act 1985. It's pretty clear law that says housing authorities need to publish details of how they will consult people, or so consult tenants. And the two different acts cover permanent residents and a different type of tenant. I forget the technical name.
Thank you, Dan. We'll take that away, but I'm sure that we do publish how we consult. But I'll take that away and provide a more detailed answer.
Yeah, let's find that out.
Yeah, Chair. In the resident engagement strategy, I think we had touched on part of this.
Right.
And one of the recommendations was that there would be a terms of engagement for contractors to better engage with residents on site as one of those approaches. But I think some of this work had started. It just depends on how far it is to really articulate the resident engagement piece. I know we're going to also be talking about resident voice as an upcoming kind of agenda. I think that would also kind of lead very strongly in how we engage and how we consult with residents.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sibs. And Fiona again.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of just to say I think that question formed part of question 4, which was posed by Shabam Ali, and I believe that it was in relation to the HIP programme, which is why I was slightly confused. And of course, in terms of consultation, you're absolutely right. But the HIP programme was an IT change programme through which updates through the committee and through the public forum, normally done through this route.
Thanks, Dan. Do you have any further supplementaries, Dan? Okay. You've also submitted a statement to this committee, and I understand you also submitted another statement which was redirected to this committee. So now you've got the opportunity to speak to either or both of those, if you would like to.
Apologies for the duplication. That's Stephen Williams's fault. Yeah, I'd like to speak to my statement. First of all, it's great to have somebody that's intimately involved in the IT programme here to answer questions clearly. That makes a huge change from what's been happening previously. Apologies for the tone of this statement, but I wrote it. You're going to have to listen to it. I'd like to remind councillors that the Housing Transformation Programme was started in secret. Details of it were not published and did not come to committee until after the 2024 elections. Today is the first time that council has made it clear that there is a phase 2 to the IT project. Previously, there has only been talk of deployment of the NEC system, as if that was going to be it, other than small amounts of tidy up work. Yeah, I find it disappointing but not surprising that 2 of my questions have not been answered. It should be possible for officers to give some estimate of how long the next phase of the project is going to take. We're in year 3 of a 2-year project, and they can't give an answer of what the predicted end date is. It's also ridiculous that officers failed to give an answer of what the extra 1.25 million that was allocated as an urgent decision was for. I still don't really understand how a project of this scope can run out of funds in a way that it makes it impossible to bring details to a committee. I mean, I understand the long time to prepare papers, but it must have been clear months before the urgent decision was taken. This committee is not being provided the information it needs to provide oversight. It's unfortunate that the repair data is not in a state where it can be presented cleanly to the committee, but it sounds like that will get sorted out, and there's 2 things that are much more impactful. The past 3 months have been hell for the housing officers and tenants. Anecdotally, it sounds like there's a lot of stress in 100 Temple offices, where officers have struggled and in many cases failed to help people register for their new accounts. Why is there nothing in the report about how this is affecting frontline staff? And of course, the requirement of having a second email address is not acceptable. The second thing that has impacted residents is the failure of BCC to maintain a decent home standard. For years, Bristol Council has boasted of having over 90% meet the decent home standard, and now we find out that the figure was just wrong. that 1 in 4 homes doesn't meet the decent home standards due to being cold. And that's not just a temporary thing. Thermal comfort failures will not decrease until a cavity wall insulation programme is instated. This is a massive failing that was buried on page 23 of a 24-page report. This housing transformation programme was started in secret, and it's looked to me for the whole time that officers have been slow walking the news of how bad the situation is. The committee system can't work like this. You're still not getting clear reports that draw attention to the important details. You're getting reports that make you all sit there, nod your heads while officers spend money without being clear on what it's being spent on. To correct a journalist in the room, I doubt the IT project was botched. It's just that as we heard today, it's a massive project that was always going to take many years to complete, and it was started much later than it should have been, which meant that the system needed to go live before it was fully finished. The milestone 1 that we have allegedly reached was meant to give a clear understanding of what went wrong in the housing department. Housing officers went on strike in 2022 due to an impossible workload, which resulted in only 9 stock condition surveys being done in 2023. This isn't mentioned in any of the Savile reports or in the answer given for one question today, where the response is a very unclear. Surveys weren't being undertaken at a sufficient rate to ensure all homes had a survey every 5 years. No, 9 surveys was never enough, and it should have been brought clearly to people's attention that Bristol City Council had just stopped doing them. The committee system can't work like this. This is a failing committee, but hopefully with perhaps a small change today. This is a failing committee that isn't being informed as to how money is being spent.
Thank you, Dan, as ever, for your forensic scrutiny of our work and the performance of our housing services. That concludes public forum for today. So we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Before that, since we've had a few slightly late arrivals, I'm going to ask members of the committee who weren't present right at the start to introduce themselves, please, starting in the front row. Thank you.
Councillor Jerome Thomas, apologies for my lateness.
Councillor Carolyn Gooch, apologies for lateness. There was someone parked in a bus stop. How dare they?
Councillor Zoe Peat for Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston. I also apologise for the delay.
No worries. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 7, which is the Finance Update Report. This report presents the Housing and Landlord Services financial forecast at period 9 against the approved budget at the end of January 2026. This report is for information only, and the officer recommendations can be found on page 16 of your pack. I'm going to invite Fiona Lester, Interim Director of Housing and Landlord Services, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. So, the Period 9 Finance Update reviews the revenue and capital forecast for both the General Fund, Housing and the HRA, comparing movements since Period 6. The General Fund revenue is on budget, whilst the capital shows a 2.3 million underspend, mainly due to the project delays. The HRA forecasts a 0.6 million revenue overspend and a 13.9 million capital underspend against a revised 145 million budget. The General Fund's improvement position is due to salary recharges, but further changes are expected before year-end. Capital underspend arises from slippage on projects like Philwood, Cultural Hub and delayed adaptations work. For the HRA, the revenue overspend increased by 0.1 million since period 6, with a 1.2 million favourable movement in repairs and maintenance, which was offset by 1.4 million adverse movement in supervision and management, mostly due to higher insurance costs. Capital underspend is mainly due to delays in retrofit and new build programmes, with a significant slippage at sites such as Brunel Ford and Leinster Avenue. Capital receipts total of 14.2 million, led by the right to buy sales. The slight HRA deficit increase has minimal impact on the covenant compliance, with a 1 million comfort remaining. Overall, there are no major concerns for the general fund, and the covenant compliance remains secure despite the small HRA deficit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So not huge variances really between this report and the previous one. See, members may be interested in interrogating some of the variances, including the slippage on some of our capital programmes. But I mean, I think I would like to highlight, before we move on to questions, the very high level of capital delivery that we're managing to maintain this year. So we're forecasting 131.9 million of capital delivery, which is comparable to last year's 139 million outturn, which was in itself the highest level of capital delivery that we've achieved within the housing revenue account ever, to my knowledge. You know, there's obviously a lot to interrogate, but also I think there's much to celebrate. And with that, I'm going to open up to questions. Councillor Thomas first.
Thank you, Chair. While acknowledging some of the critiques around the IT system, which we'll cover off a bit more later in the relevant section of the agenda, I do want to kind of credit the leadership team and the whole staff on actually hitting budget. It's a huge achievement, and it's a big shift since last year as well. So, yeah, thank you. I also think that the presentation of the financial information, having it first in the agenda, is really helpful. It's much easier to understand. I do prefer it not having a PowerPoint presentation accompanying it, which shows lots of different information presented in a different way. So it's all kind of accessible information showing kind of quite a good news story in challenging circumstances. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
I agree with that. The information is really good, and it's only slightly disappointed that Martin isn't here for us to say, yeah, this is really good information, and it is really clear. And I also agree, Barry, your point about the delivery of the capital programme, which is really important. Two questions. One is, I thought I should ask a question about the Fulwood Luff work, given that that's quite a big proportion of the slippage. Basically, the housing stuff is good and progressing well. The community side of it is a little bit delayed, but not massively. And the public realm stuff is much more delayed, and has had lots more questions about it. So thank you, Barry, and also Ed, for allowing us an opportunity to express our views on how we come to a settled position on the public realm, which is really important, and to show that we are listening to residents' views on that. We haven't that issue hasn't been communicated yet, so there is a job to be done, not just over the TRO itself, but over what the plan is for that area. That given will soon be the next financial year, it's important that we kind of communicate that to residents. I'm sure we will, but we haven't quite got around to it. It's kind of a month after we have the chair's briefing, so we probably should be about now. I would have thought. If Martin was also here, I was also going to ask him, because the other thing he's done tremendously is support us in planning for next year's budget, which is really, really clear and really well thought through. There has been some announcements over the last couple of weeks that have slightly impacted on that. So, in particular, on the homelessness prevention grant area, where there is a transitional settlement that we might not have expected. I don't expect, Fiona, for you to have a plan today for how you're going to either spend that money or not spend that money. But I think probably next committee, we probably should do. So I was going to ask, is that something that we would expect to be in next version of this?
Yeah, Fiona, do you want to respond? Yeah.
So just thank you very much for those kind comments, both councillors, and I shall make sure that Martin gets them, so it's well received. And yes, of course, we know there have been some windfalls, shall we say, and we will make sure that we capture that and give at least an outline of plans for how we propose to manage that moving forward, and we'll pop it in, make sure that it's in Martin's budget.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yes, on the communication around Phil, particularly around the public realm, I think definitely there's a piece of work that we need to do there around informing the public of the sort of the emerging plans. I think probably the reason why that hasn't been done yet is because to an extent they are still emerging following the engagement that we've had. But yes, we do need to communicate that to residents as soon as we can. So yeah, let's take that away. Okay, thank you. Councillor Chavalella.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to get some clarification in terms of some of the slippage, about 10%, 14 million in the capital program. What is the current capacity or interest of contractors, and in terms of the delivery of some of the capital projects? Is there a shortage of supply, or is the issue more administrative in terms of the procurement? Because there's a time delay, and that time delay is creating that slippage. So where is that time delay? Is it more of an administrative part, or is it more on the market part?
So I'll take that question for Sian, because she's obviously very new. Thank you, Councillor. So I think it's a range of all of those things, and it's very wise of you to have picked that up. So some of the issues relate to procurement, early procurement in early days, where items that we tried to procure took longer than anticipated and therefore caused delays, and so therefore we've been forecasting that. Some of it's about weather, and other things really are around challenges that we have with the market and contractors more widely. I do think, however, and this is a piece of work we picked up in a performance conversation this week, that there is more work that we can do around how we forecast spend and how we predict it, so that we have clarity around what we intend to do each year, and we manage our slippage more effectively. So that there is a piece of work to be done around that.
Yes, I'm interested in that piece of work in terms of the detail and the clarity, because we need to understand the capacity in the market, because the time delays are creating tremendous unmet expectations in the public in terms of the retrofits. People are waiting for their windows to get done. People are waiting for their houses to be removed of damp and mold. And the longer we have more slippages, the more we have cases of people then going out to ombudsman and so forth. So this has got a cascading step. So I think one that we can prevent is more around our own procurement. If that needs more capacity, so that, like, one here was more of a delay about signing a contract. I mean, if someone has to take that long to sign a contract, So what can we control, and what actions can we take to make sure that where we can control, we act on it to reduce some of these slippages?
Thanks, Sid. Who's going to respond? Are you going to respond? Sean.
Thank you. I think, as Fiona mentioned, we've identified some areas where we can be looking at how we forecast our spend better. For example, we know we're not going to do any external painting works in the winter months. Those are more likely to happen in the summer months, but we we forecast everything at the moment across the whole 12 months. So we'll be looking at that. We're also looking at things like contract management, and where we have got contractors that aren't performing, and holding them more to account of their contractual arrangements. So there's a number of things that we can do. Where we're providing the works internally, our own teams, we know that with some more work we can do around productivity in that space, and the new reporting functions that we'll get from NEC will help support that as we go forward.
Councillor Stone.
Yeah, thanks very much. I got just a quick question. It's really about the revenue account, because I don't know if one hand doesn't understand the other hand. If what I'm trying to say is that you've basically right. The electrical reporting tests and inspections are down to 63%, which is pretty much outrageous, to be honest with you. And yet this report is saying quite categorically that there's a favourable variance in the fact of the matter that we are going to reduce the electrical safety testing costs. So how is it that on one report it's saying that we need more test and inspect costs done, and in this report it's saying that that's favourable because we didn't have to do these smoke alarm tests?
Fiona?
So I'm not actually, in terms of, I understand what you're saying in terms of the two different parts of work. I think when that summary is wrapping all revenue spend, and not just the revenue spend that's located around or that's associated with the electrical works. And Councillor, as you're aware, our aim is to increase the numbers, and we have to. Part of our milestone 2 is increase our delivery around electrical and M&E completions, not reduce it. So I think the commentary relates to revenue spend as a whole within the HRA and different parts of work.
Thank you. Councillor Bales.
It's just some niggles and a bit of a moan as usual. As you know, I'm a council tenant, so I moved into my house about 12 years ago, and I was due new windows then. I still don't have them. I waited 9 years, maybe 10 years for a new shed roof, a banister and a kitchen door. Like 10 years of moaning and complaining. And like a lot of tenants, after moaning and complaining for years and years, you just give up. So why does it take so long to get anything done? That's a long time to wait for something quite simple, a kitchen door. That's health and safety. That's just a really tiny amount of money to spend. And it's not a planned programme like the windows are, but as council tenants, if we ask for something or reduce something, we would actually like it.
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. Fiona.
Thank you, Councillor Bales. Well, I'm not going to try to excuse it because it's unexcusable. And that's a start. And I think they are two different things. So, as you say, a kitchen door, that's a day-to-day repair. It shouldn't take 10 years. Obviously, I can't reflect back the details of that and what happened 10 years ago, but it shouldn't take 10 years. We've got standard job responses that we should do a particular job in a certain period of time, and that's what we should do in terms of the way that we should be responding. In terms of planned work, I think there's an acknowledgement across the HRA that our planned programmes of work, we've really picked up in that space. We weren't doing as well as we ought to have done. We recognise that. And that's why we've got all of the work we're doing with the consumer standards work, all of the work we're doing with pushing the service towards meeting milestone 1 and milestone 2. That was because we weren't performing as we should do, both in our day-to-day activity, but also in our planned and scheduled work. So I think I'm not going to try to explain that, because there is no justification for it, but to acknowledge the way that you feel, and I'm sure that many of our residents feel, and accept that we need to do better. And this is what we're trying to work on at the moment.
Yeah,
thank you.
Completely agree with that. No one should be waiting 9, 10 years for a simple repair, or something as simple as a door. It's about the respect that we show to our residents. It's about the the relationship that we have as a landlord to our tenants. It's about making sure that people feel valued, really, and that's what we're trying to do. Councillor Pete, next.
Just a very small question. I was speaking with a resident yesterday, so I haven't managed to log this as formal casework yet. But they wanted to know, they received a letter last year saying that they'd be getting a new heating system. Obviously, this didn't happen. They called up the council and they were like, well, we're not really sure if this is going to happen anymore. And so they just wanted to know, what is the best way until the new IT system's fully rolled out for them to have input and get kind of updates about what's actually happening with their houses? Obviously, I appreciate this, the new IT system will come and it'll save all of us and fix all of our problems. But until then, what is the best thing to do?
Thank you, Zoe. Fiona.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. The new IT system won't be the elixir that solves all else. We all know that, because this is about communication, is what you're talking about there. I think it would be useful if after the meeting you either approach me or an officer, and we'll take the details of that particular resident and communicate with them around what should have been promised or what was promised. In terms of more widely, I think we need to make better use of our website and how we communicate with residents. You know that we've moved away from annual resident updates that we used to just do it once a year. We biannually now have newsletters that go out, a newsletter that will go out to residents, within which we can start to do things like share our programmes of work, our planned approach, what we're doing where, and I will take that forward as an activity to speak to our comms team, or working on our bi-monthly newsletters about how can we communicate more effectively with our residents. In addition to that, I would also say there are those opportunities, as you know, for residents to become more involved and to therefore have greater influence in the decision making. Again, on our website, it's gone live now. That on the website it talks to residents about our two forms of engagement, both the resident scrutiny panel and also the resident a wider panel, and how you can get involved and the parts of work that they're working on, how you can use those forums to influence decisions and to get answers. So I would suggest we try to encourage residents or your constituents that approach you that are council tenants to make use of those avenues of communication.
Thanks. Yeah.
I really thank you for that. I very much appreciate the biannual letters. I suppose the only issue is obviously it's going to be very standardised for large groups of people. So if they've got just a question about their property, it's not necessarily going to be answered. But again, I appreciate that's something that, the IT system will hopefully help with. Got a lot riding on this IT system. And the other thing is it might be really useful for the tenants' forums to just reach out to the food banks, like Bristol North West Food Banks. Gets a lot of people who are council tenants, and sometimes it's easier for residents to reach out to these local, community hubs and charities than it is necessary to go on the panel and stuff like that, or the programs. So it might be just, I don't know why I'm suggesting it here, but it might be worth just reaching out to all the local community groups and charities. I know that in my ward, Bristol North West Food Bank is doing some incredible work, and liaising with them would really help.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. I think that's a really good suggestion. Let's take that away. And I think on your point around people's individual, people's individual relationship with us as their landlord and their homes. I mean, we all last year approved something called a target operating model for how we wanted to, how we wanted our residents to experience the services that we provide, and the whole point of that is that we need to move away from a service that's kind of structured around the needs of the needs of the housing service and more around the needs of residents. And that means being more responsive to what residents' own communication is. It means actually being proactive about letting people know if something that we've promised going to happen is going to be delayed. All of that stuff. It's about it's about creating that trust, which we know is has been a real challenge. Okay, I'm going to move us on. We've covered quite a lot of ground with the finance report, and we're going to move on now to agenda item 8, which is the quarterly performance report for quarter 2 of 25-26. Oh yes, sorry. Before that, I need to say that the officer recommendation of this report is that the committee notes the report on the period 6 forecast for housing and landlord services. Okay, so that's noted. So yeah, our next agenda item is the quarterly performance report. This report presents an update on the latest quarterly performance measures with a focus on Tier 1 measures, including business plan metrics and actions, plus selected Tier 2 metrics. It's for information only, and the officer recommendations can be found on page 20 of your pack. I'm going to invite Fiona once again to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So, an overview of the performance metrics. So, 17% of performance metrics with targets are on or above target. So that's 2 out of 12. Within this, 13% of Tier 1 metrics, 1 out of 8, and 25% of Tier 2 metrics, 1 out of 4, met this quarter. I think it's important just to add that 100% of the city outcome measures with available data are improving compared to last year, so that's all 3. The business plan actions, 88% of actions are on track, reflecting strong delivery confidence across most areas. In relation to housing, affordable housing delivery remains a really positive story. We've delivered 286 affordable homes in quarter 2, which is significantly higher than in previous years, where we delivered 176 at the same period. So the trend is improving. So, improving landlord compliance across key safety areas, asbestos, electrical, fire, gas, lifts, water safety, damp and mould. This is currently showing at 88% against a 100% target. This reflects data systems limitations at the time with the launch of NEC and C365, which we've talked about. As we know, we're doing lots of work in that area, and we expect to be able to demonstrate improved reporting and stronger performance in quarter 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. So, a lot to discuss here as well, of course. But I did want to highlight the delivery of affordable homes as being a particular high point of what we're achieving at the moment as a council. 286 affordable homes delivered in year, and we've got 478 council homes in our pipeline as well. That's part of a much broader affordable housing delivery programme across the city, with thousands to be delivered over the next few years. And I did want to highlight as well that one of the things that we agreed at our work programme setting workshop last month was that we would set up a task and finish group to really delve into our affordable housing delivery plans over the next few years. So we've got an interim affordable housing delivery strategy at the moment, and we're looking to, now that we've got more certainty around things like the government investment plans, and we'll soon hopefully have more certainty around our local plan, then we can really get stuck in as a committee, or at least those members who want to be involved in that, in shaping how we deliver affordable homes for the future. wanted to highlight as well some of the other successes that we've seen. 905 move-ons from temporary accommodation, 1,200 retrofits. We are delivering at an impressive level in lots of ways. Although, of course, as some of these metrics show, there's a mixed picture. So let's open this up for questions, and I'm going to start with Councillor Peat.
Thank you. So I want to keep it brief as much as I can. I would say there are kind of three things in this report that really stand out to me, which is Brava Papa Papa Mother 368 on page 22, which is about the decent homes. Papa Brava 357 on page 22, which is about the goal to reduce the amount of people living in temporary accommodation. I could say the letters, but I'm committed to the phonetic alphabet now, so I'm really sorry. And Golf Romeo 352 Bravo, which is about rough sleepers. So on that's page 23. So these are things that obviously we're not doing as well on, that are quite concerning. Obviously, in terms of the last two that I mentioned, reducing the amount of people in temporary accommodation and reducing the amount of rough sleepers, to me, it's very, very linked to temporary accommodation. They're one and the same in my opinion, that they're linked. Obviously, we have the policy that came here and was voted on that a portion of our temporary council stock would then be moved into temporary accommodation. So to me, it makes sense why we're not meeting the first of the latter two goals, because we're actively putting people into temporary accommodation. Unfortunately, that also means that, waits on home choice are going to be lengthened because we have less stock to put people in because we've got temporary accommodation that we're using instead of, hotels. So I also understand why homelessness is technically increasing within the city as well. It's just quite concerning, and I think it's not really a question, I suppose. I just wanted to speak my mind more than anything. It feels like sometimes the goals of this policy, of this committee, don't often align with the actual things that we say we're going to achieve sometimes, like reduce temporary accommodation usage, reduce homelessness, but then we're going to move more people into temporary accommodation. It just doesn't line up. So I suppose I'd like a response to that in a vague kind of non-question way.
Okay, thanks, Zoe. So I think we'll separate out those two parts, because I think decent homes and homelessness are quite different areas.
It was PB357 that was mostly my concern, and that's the reducing people in temporary accommodation, and GR352B, which is the homelessness one. The decent home ones is more as just like an add-on or something that I'm a little unhappy with, but I'd like to focus on the temporary accommodation and homeless one, please.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to hand over to, if it's all right, I'm going to hand over to Paul Sylvester in a minute, but I would just like to say that we're seeing homelessness and rough sleeping rise all over the country. It's not just in Bristol. And the reasons for that, I think, have to do with rising poverty. They have to do with rising housing costs related to people's income. They have to do with really an economic situation that is extremely perilous for the most vulnerable people in our society. And that's not something that's confined to Bristol. We have very, very, we have some really specific and wicked challenges here in Bristol that have to do with the inaccessibility of our housing market to so many people. But really, what's driving the rise in temporary accommodation numbers, what's driving the rise in homelessness, rise in rough sleeping, behind all of this is an economy that is failing the most vulnerable people in our society, people being pushed to the margins, people falling out of the kinds of safety nets and supports that they rely on. And that's something that's something that we need to address nationally as well as locally. And we need, frankly, much more support from the government than we're currently getting for the poorest people in our society. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Paul.
I was going to say that you've done my job for me, Chair, I think. But yeah, so just building on what Councillor Parsons said, there are some good news that we heard recently as part of the funding announcements. You know, Councillor Logan mentioned that for a long time we've been saying that there's a gap in our commissioning of supported accommodation for those people with the highest needs, and we're having more people who are long-term rough sleepers on the streets, where it's not necessarily accommodation is the issue, it's around their support and dealing with their mental health issues and everything else. So as part of the National Plan for Ending Homelessness, the government announced that there'd be some funding for supported accommodation targeted on single homelessness and reducing rough sleeping. And we're going to be getting £10.1 million over 3 years, which is an incredible investment in the city, and that will directly impact the number of people that are sleeping well. So it's really, really good news. I'm so pleased that it came down the line, and it's something that the sector have been calling on for a while in terms of, Councillor Parsons mentioned that support from government to make a shift in terms of what we're able to do around rough sleeping. And I hear what you're saying about temporary accommodation. I do, and a lot of the work of the programme is finding more cost-effective solutions, providing better quality temporary accommodation, recognising that temporary accommodation is needed, and if we weren't using council housing, we'd be using more expensive private sector stuff. It's not that we wouldn't find somewhere for people to live, it's just that we're using alternatives. The other thing that I want to say is that we're starting to get ahead of steam behind our partnership approach to tackling homelessness in the city. We've got a very strong steering group that looks over our homelessness and rough sleeping action plan. That's really starting to work more effectively together with the voluntary sector, the advice sector, housing partners, commission services, social care, colleagues, all coming together to try and do what we can within the constraints that Councillor Parsons has set out. So we did expect TA to continue to increase over the year. That was we had an ambitious target at the beginning of the year, but it became clear, with the various factors that are going on, the increase in presentations, etc., that increase would continue. But it's things like the intervention from the government which will help. We're all getting quite excited about renters' rights, keeping our fingers crossed around that. Lots of good stuff in there. There will be some hiccups, I think, around shift in the sector, but brilliant protections and provisions for tenants. So I'm sure that will help as well. So, not directly answering your question, but I think speaking to the broader issues that we're dealing with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Fiona.
So, thank you, Chair. So I was just going to touch on one point, Councillor Peach, with reference to the use of general, the TA, use of the HRA's accommodation for TA, and I recognise that fact and that dilemma that we have as both the social housing provider and also the local authority. And trying to wear both hats can be a challenge. So we recognise that. I just wanted to remind everyone really that the arrangement that we currently have in place was for a fixed period only. And we are currently looking at that. So there's a reflection, there's some work being done to analyse our performance and to reflect where we are now and to look at how we migrate out of this, the use of the accommodation in that way, because it was never a long-term plan for all of the reasons that you've raised.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a lot of the work that's happening as part of our Tackling Homelessness programme, for example, about things like new uses of registered providers, about the proposal to set up a council-owned housing provider, registered provider, a lot of the innovation work that we're doing in order to deliver better quality temporary accommodation. Part of the end game of that we see is that new provision, that new supply, because really so much of this is about, it's a numbers game. We need to be able to provide enough temporary homes for those people who need it, because we have a statutory duty to house people in need. The provision of all of this new supply that we're bringing on means that we should be able to start returning homes that are currently used for temporary accommodation back into the general needs stock, so that they would be available for people to bid on for home choice. That's what we're aiming to do, and that's what we're aiming to do that soon as well. This committee gave authorisation for that programme to happen for 2 years, and it's not my desire to extend it. I do want us to touch on decent homes as well, because I think that is an important issue that you've raised, and I think there is, there's something there that we need to unpack. I wonder who's best placed to respond to that. Richard, would you like to talk a bit to the rise in non-decency that we've seen?
Yeah, I can. I suppose first I'd like to sort of point out this links to the previous discussion and the statement earlier on as well. Because this report states a position which is at the end of Q2, so that's prior to the NEC system going live. So this was the higher decent homes figure, when the one that we discussed earlier was which we felt was the more realistic, which is lower. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, because there is a disconnect there between the timings of the different reports. I suppose just similar to what was discussed earlier, that we do feel that the lower decent homes figure is more realistic and reflects the condition of our homes, and some of that is through a more robust measurement, but also through the stock condition survey, identifying the true decency position in our homes, and very much a focus on ensuring our homes are safe and in good condition. But before we can respond to that, we need to understand what the true position is. So absolutely, it's lower than we'd like it to be, but I do think there is a positive about us knowing what the true position is, so then we can respond based on that. And I suppose I'd like to sort of call out one of the pillars of the Housing Consumer Standards Programme was to recognise that our coverage of stock condition surveys and frequency of those was inadequate and needed to increase. And that's why it was one of the key activities. And I think we've discussed it over the last 18 months, haven't we, at quite a few of these committees, about the pace of stock condition surveys. And I suppose I'd just like to say that will help inform what the true condition of our homes is, which will then inform our longer term response. So it's really important that we continue to push with those stock condition surveys. We are on target to achieve 70% by the end of March, and then 100% by the end of March 2027, and which will continue to be a key priority for us. But I think as we get that, it will also inform the asset management strategy. So the asset management strategy is going to come to this committee in May, and that will really call out what our focus areas have got to be, and decency will be a significant priority outlined in that asset management strategy. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I think for too long we didn't have a true picture of the real condition of our homes. I think this council presented too rosy a picture, frankly, of what was happening. in our council-owned homes. It's really, really important that we have a clear understanding of the genuine condition of all of our homes in order to be able to make the investment decisions we need to. I'm going to go to Councillor Stone next.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So, yes, I just want to have some reassurances about the decent home standards, because obviously the government is not going to push forward the decent home standards till 2035, and I just want to be reassured that all these stock condition surveys are going to actually turn into action, because there's no, you have a survey, but as long as we have to make sure we act upon those surveys, otherwise there's no point having the survey. Okay, yeah. I want to be assured that because they've decided to not release or publish the decent home standards to 2035, that we're not going to lose the outcome picture of actually what it means, because it's not about whether we tick boxes for governments, whether or not we do actually provide decent homes for the people who live in them, and I want those assurances. My second question is, we asked this in the last meeting, when can we have a workshop on how the NEC works, so that we can all have an understanding of this IT system that's going to literally, create decent homes for everybody. It'd be great to see how it works. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Sorry. Fiona.
So, thank you, Chair. So, in response, Councillor, absolutely, two things. Yes, we will arrange a session for councillors to work through and look at the NEC system. We've already done that same activity actually with our engaged residents, with the residents looking at how easy it is or how difficult it was to report repairs and to use the system. And of course we can put the similar session on for yourself, so leave that with me. I'll make sure that's arranged. And the second point with reference to decency of our homes and stock condition surveys, absolutely, the assurance is, the better data that we have, that will help us inform our planned programmes of work, and that is our intention, so that we understand how best to prioritise our activities, how we can mitigate risk for our residents, and how we can ensure we keep people safe. So that information is absolutely crucial, and it is our intention to use it. Thank you, Chair.
I've got a lot of hands. I would just like to caution that although we do have a fairly light agenda today, we do have more business to get through later on. So if any of your questions relate to things that might be covered better perhaps in later items such as the Consumer Standards Programme, then maybe consider asking them then instead. But I'm going to go to Councillor Bales next.
My question was about replacing gas boilers in council homes, and we did discuss this briefly last year when I subbed, when we were talking about heat pumps and energy networks, and the answer was we're never going to fit them in council homes, when actually they're the people who live in council homes are usually the poorest, most vulnerable people that are really struggling with life in general, struggling with the cost of living, to put clothes on their back, feed their kids. So surely it makes sense to lower their bills first. So why are we not doing it in council housing? It just doesn't make any sense.
I think possibly you might be misremembering some of the conversations we've had, because one of the things that that this committee approved last year was a decarbonisation plan by which we're looking to replace gas in all of our council homes by 2050, either by linking them up to a heat network where that's feasible, or by installing heat pumps where we have homes that wouldn't be connected to a heat network, either because they're generally because they're not in an area where we're looking to build out the heat network into. So that is very much the plan for our council homes, is that we're looking to completely remove gas from all of our estate.
Sorry, I missed the last
That's
bit of
okay.
what you said, but yeah, maybe I need to come to committee more often then. But yeah, it makes sense. Like, why would we replace like for like when there's something better out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the real key sort of principles that we've adopted as a committee was that there should be a just transition. So, you know, it's important that when people have new energy installations, that they do actually see their bills go down, that they do actually see their thermal comfort, as the jargon is. They actually feel warmer and more comfortable in their homes, and that's something that we're determined is going to happen when we're retrofitting all of our existing homes. Richard, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think just the thing I'd just like to say is, yes, the strategy is to decarbonise our homes, but I think it's important to note about the homes have got to be energy efficient to be able to accommodate heat pumps. So what we need to make sure is the property's ready for that decarbonisation. We've already discussed the drop in Decent Homes Standard, and a lot of that is related to thermal efficiency of our homes. If we were to put a heat pump in one of those homes that weren't ready, so didn't have the insulation, didn't have the fabric to accommodate that, that would lead to much higher bills and a lot more damp and mould and issues within the homes. So absolutely the direction of travel, but I suppose it comes back to us understanding our homes and making sure that we're putting those foundational things in place first. For example, addressing the fabric first to ensure it can accommodate the heat decarbonisation.
Thanks. Do you have a follow-up?
So are you saying some homes might be more difficult? So my house is made out of concrete, not brick. So would that be more difficult to fit this than a brick and mortar traditional type house?
Quite possibly. It depends on the thermal efficiency. So each home has an energy rating, energy performance certificate, and an energy rating. So we will know what homes are more suitable than others. So potentially your home, if it hasn't got adequate insulation, for example, if it is a concrete build, it may require significant fabric upgrade and improvement first before we would be able to put a non-gas system in.
Sian, did you want to come in?
Yeah, there are some homes that, if you look at people who've gone early with this kind of retrofit, have failed, and that's why sometimes heat pumps get a bit of a bad rep from social housing residents. I think the key thing about the stock condition surveys and the importance of having that data is it allows us to see the whole picture, and then we can say, actually, these homes would benefit from a different type of heating, it would help out with affordability, but actually there's a lot more work to do to make that home right, that they are going to get the benefits. So that's what we'll be able to use the data and have that full picture and make that decision, because it would be very detrimental to do that in homes that aren't ready. So it's that timing as well of what we do.
Councillor Chabalala.
There's one sec. Housing and landlord, part 323. So the full business case for a registered provider. That's some good news there, and it says here that this will go to strategy and resources for January. Has it gone to Jan? Has it gone there? No. Okay. So I guess my question is, would strategy and resource approve it, then we see it, or does it come here, we approve it, then it goes to strategy and resource?
So
and when is the paper coming?
So the revised plan for that now is that the paper for the new potential registered provider is going to come to strategy and resources in May. I'm going to suggest that we park further discussion on that until we get to the paper on the tackling homelessness programme, where we can talk about it in more detail.
No problem.
Thanks. Councillor Logan?
I promise quick questions on what we see here on the performance. On affordable homes, you're right, the completions are really impressive. Is it possible to know when project started? Either planning permission granted or start on site, so that the figures give an impression over the plan, not just the fixed endpoint, conceivably. And my other question on repairs completed within the timescale, it's really difficult to know how to interpret the figures here, because if effectively what it says is these figures are rubbish, we don't trust them, and we'll get better figures in the NEC, which we'll talk about later. I don't know what to expect this next time here. I don't think it's really good enough just to say it will be fine in the medium term when we get the new process happening, because the point about reporting on jobs finished when they complete rather than when they're invoiced is completely sensible, and we should be doing that. But I don't know when we will have that. So if we have another quarter of this kind of figure, I don't really know whether we can interpret how good or bad it is.
Yeah. So I think on the affordable housing and the completions and starts on site, I think probably that's best picked up in the affordable housing delivery reports that we get half yearly to this committee, which includes information not only on completions but also when projects are starting. So that gives a sense of the sort of the pipeline coming through. Do we know the date if that's going to be? I think it's. I'll need to check the exact date of that. We'll get back to you. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Rose. We'll get that information in a second. And then on the repair jobs being closed down. I mean, this is part of the reason why we were referred to the regulator and why we self-referred to the regulator in the first place, right? You know, we need to have good information about the work that we're doing on people's homes, and so obviously. This is an area of significant concern. Who would like to respond on that? Sian?
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating for officers to also not know that they can trust the figures, because it doesn't help us determine where to put our resources and that kind of thing. We know that some of the figures aren't right, because we know that there's some jobs that are stuck and haven't gone through completion. So we've got some additional resources coming in to help us push those jobs through. They've been completed for residents, but they haven't been completed in the system. So it's skewing the figures. It's also impacting on us being able to measure our productivity of our trades teams, to be able to say actually where we could increase works, where we can improve and speed up that clearing of those backlog of jobs. There's quite a bit of work for us to do in that area, so I'm not sure we can guarantee that it will be by the next quarter that we'll have an accurate position of everything for you. But what we will do is try and move forward with that and start to show you that the progress that we're making on clearing that up and working with NEC to get that resolved. But I wouldn't want to commit to end of next quarter.
Okay, thanks very much. And just wanted to confirm that we're going to be getting the next affordable housing report at our next committee, so that's in April. Now, I've been pretty relaxed about timings, but actually I think I've probably been a bit too relaxed, so I am going to move us on. So I just need to read out the officer recommendation for this report. Oh, apologies, Jerome. Well, yeah, sorry. Let's go to Jerome then, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Thanks very much. I think there's a kind of real improvement in it feels like the performance management framework is evolving quite fast, and I particularly like the links through to the kind of corporate performance management, kind of dashboard framework. Now it feels like. We've got the right metrics. They're starting to be presented in the right way. I would say that I think, part of the rationale of having a good performance management framework is that you can kind of see things at one glance. And quite a lot of the officer notes are really padded out a whole lot. So actually, when you're looking at it on screen, you can almost only see one item at a time, which sort of defeats the purpose of having an overview. I really like the kind of the dashboard of the metrics over time, but when you're looking at something like people in temporary accommodation, we're only going back 2 years. It would be really good to know what the 5-year trend is, and some of these other ones, having the 5-year trends would be great as well. I mean, this is all part of a maturing process. I also note that on the policy outcome of number of homes built in Bristol, that the figures don't match between what's in the body of the text and what the chart shows, and there are actually no officer notes around it. So, given that creating new homes in Bristol is a really significant policy outcome for this committee, we would expect some sort of officer notes around that. So those are my pains. But, it's great progress.
Thanks very much, Jerome. Yeah, great. We're gonna take those comments away, and we'll make sure that our next report reflects that. Okay, right. I'm going to move on now then. So the officer recommendations for this report is just one, which is that the committee notes the performance progress report. Thanks, everybody. So, agenda item 9 is the risk report. This provides an update on current significant strategic risks relevant to this committee to achieving the Council's objectives as set out in our Corporate Strategy 2025 to 2030. It summarises progress in managing the risks and actions being taken as at Q3 of 25 to 26. It's for information only, and the recommendations can be found on page 28. Now, there's been, I'm informed, an error in the report. The report should have today's date on it, and it should also list Fiona Lester as the officer presenting and Nick Hibbard as the exec director lead. I'm going to invite Fiona to introduce the report now.
Thank you, Chair. So, Q3 corporate risk report for housing. This quarter shows a stable overall risk position for the Housing Directorate. All 3 of our corporate risks remain static, as their scores haven't changed for at least 3 reporting cycles. While the risks remain significant, they are being consistently managed and closely monitored. The 2 high risk-rated risks remain CRR 60, compliance of our HRA housing stock with statutory and consumer standards, which is rated at 28, and CRR 52, compliance with the Building Safety Act, which is also rated at 21. Both have remained unchanged throughout the year, reflecting the scale of complexity of the work required to meet the regulatory expectations and the emphasis we place on these activities. We have had no new risks recommended for escalation this quarter, which is a really positive thing. At the directorate level, 2 operational risks remain high but have not seen any escalation. So these 2 are the delivery of new affordable housing and the planned maintenance investment and its impact on repair performance, both scoring 21. These are being actively managed through the divisional controls. It's acknowledged that whilst we've seen high levels of risk activity across the whole council at Q3, the Housing Division continues to see some of the highest average risk scores, reflecting the sustained pressure on compliance, building safety and the repairs teams. Staff are working very hard to provide activities, and we recognise that more needs to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. So I'm going to go straight to questions and comments, and I'm going to start with Councillor Stone.
Yeah, I'm looking at this report and I'm feeling a bit uneasy about it, to be honest with you. We've got a 5-year electrical domestic testing cycle, which is reduced down. It's in the red. It's at 67%. I am a qualified electrician. I feel that I need to volunteer my services to you guys because, honestly, we really need that to be much better. I'm also seeing that our capped gas service, which I demonstrated demonstrably last time, has gone up to 386 gas supplies being capped. I was hoping that would come down. I was hoping we'd have actually a real positive action plan where our gas service engineers could go in there with a top-up guard of some kind, working with energy providers or with Citizens Vice Bureau, where we could actually literally, do those tests and not having to cap these suppliers. So I'm really angry about this report, that nothing has actually moved. So I'd just like you to actually explain those reasons why first of all, the capped gas supply has gone up, B, why we haven't got enough electricians to actually do these safety tests, and also on the report, which I'm really really annoyed about is that it clearly doesn't state the amount of mould and damp initially on that matrix. It seems to like just like forget about it. You have to go deep into the report to actually look at the standard of mould and damp that's happening in the report. So I'm going to leave the mould and damp out for now, but I'll probably come back to it. Just those two questions. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lisa. I'm going to ask Fiona to respond.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't really expecting to be the one to respond, and I think colleagues will be able to give you greater detail. But what I will say is that a lot of the detail for the things that you've raised is contained within the Housing Consumer Standard Report. So we'll pick some of the detailed answers up there, Chair, if we may. I think colleagues may wish to respond with reference to, obviously, to damp and mould and the action plan, so we can talk to that, and electrical safety. We should be able to respond to that. Thank you, Chair.
Richard.
Yeah, I think the report you're referring to is the landlord compliance report, which is under item 10. So I just wonder whether we park that and then absolutely pick those questions up under that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Are there any further questions or comments on the risk report? As Fiona indicated, the risks have been static for a while, and I think there's a continued conversation that I think we need to have about what we do about such static risks. But we think that there are signs, at least, that some of these tier 1 risks may be, there's light at the end of the tunnel in some cases, and we may be looking to see those reduced later in the year. So if there's no further questions or comments, I'm going to move to the recommendations, which are that the committee notes this report. Thank you. Agenda item 10 is the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme. This report presents the update to the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme, the latest landlord compliance performance report, as Councillor Stone was referring to, the Housing IT Transformation Programme update. I'd like to highlight that actually as an element of this, which is new and is something that we're looking to do more of in future. The Residents' Voice actions and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, the upcoming Competence and Conduct Standard, and the update from the latest regulatory review meetings with the Regulator of Social Housing. This report is for information only, and the recommendations can be found on page 37. I'm going to invite Richard James, who is the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme lead, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you. I'll just give a brief overview of the report. There's quite a bit in there. Firstly, I'd just like to just apologise for the... I've noticed that the cover report, some of the numbering on the later sections has gone a little bit awry in the version that was issued. Right, the first section is very much about the overall programme delivery. We're currently at amber status. We've discussed a few times today about milestone 2. So we're currently assessing our progress against milestone 2. Quite a number of those items are related to delivery of backlog works, and I'm sure we'll have some questions about that, which some of our assessment is related to the NEC system and reporting. So we'll touch on that in a minute, I think. The performance reporting, which was reference to Councillor Stone's question, we've picked out some good performance against communal area gas servicing. We have said there is steady progress against electrical inspections, but we do acknowledge that when you compare progress against a 5-year inspection programme, which is now coming into force, that we've still got a long way to go. We're currently at 67%. The teams are accelerating delivery. We're delivering, I think, about 500 inspections a month, and in the last year 7,000 electrical inspections were undertaken, but we do need to move faster, and there's a new contractor that is being brought in to enable that to happen, and there was also increased budget within the 26-27 HRA budget, which was approved last night, to enable that acceleration of the programme. So we're aiming to get to compliance, I think, by April 2027. On domestic gas, we are showing a drop in performance there, again related to some of the issues post NEC go live. In the report here, we were reporting 221 overdue gas services. Just to say, the latest position that we're looking at is showing about 180. So it is an improving position and stabilising that, but there's still ongoing work to do. Response repairs, outstanding numbers. I'm sure there'll be questions on this, so I won't go into too much detail now, but we are showing increased numbers of response repairs. A significant proportion of those figures are due to jobs that have been completed but haven't been able to be closed in the system. So we can give some further detail on that. Decent homes, we've discussed a lot today, so I probably won't go into too much detail on that. There is a section on the housing IT programme talking about progress to date, challenges and the next phase. Again, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, so I won't talk to that any further. And just to point you to a update on Residents' Voice, which touches on progress with the Barton House review, but also the new resident and community panel and work that's ongoing with the housing scrutiny panel as well. And then just there's a couple of sections that talk about legislative changes focusing on the competency conduct standard, and also some information on our ongoing engagement with the regulator of social housing.
Thank you very much, Richard. So yeah, just to just wanted to confirm then that one of the things that this committee obviously is very interested in is progress against our milestones. And what we're proposing to do is to bring a report on milestone 2 to our next committee, because of some of the issues that we've identified with our data, that meaning that we need to do some more due diligence to make sure to confirm whether or not we've successfully completed all of the actions against that milestone. Yeah. Great. Thanks very much. I'm going to open up to questions and comments then. I'm going to start with Councillor Logan.
One question on milestone 2, planning, and then some questions on the NEC. So I think you're allowed, Richard, to say we haven't met it if we haven't met it. It's because I think that the plan in the paper was to say we thought at the point of the paper, I think it was 93% of milestone 2 would be met. We'd make an assessment in March to say whether we would, and that's fine. It's fine to say if we haven't made it, we haven't made it. If that's true, that's true. And I don't think we should be. Let's report what we have, and there are some obvious reasons things that we need to fix. That no one will be outraged if we know the plan of the current program. It's more important to know what has to be achieved in order to make that. I think the report kind of nearly says that, but doesn't kind of get to that point. But if you want to comment on that first, then please do.
Yes, I get that, and I'm sure there will be follow-on actions that come out of it. But the reason that we didn't bring the full report is because we haven't got the evidence to be able to confirm that position in every instance. What we did for milestone 1 is we brought quite a substantive pack of information that was evidence, and then we had peer review from an external organisation. So we didn't want to. We weren't ready for that because of some of the data issues. But you're right. I think there will be some follow-on work that comes out of that, and we will absolutely clearly articulate that in the report that comes to April.
I'm sure all colleagues will have questions on parts of the system, so I'm not going to ask everything. I'm sure all of our colleagues will do. I really want to ask the issue about having 2 email addresses. So did you want to comment on that? Yeah. Can I do that? Can I ask that?
Yeah.
Great,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't realise until earlier this year that we were requiring a second email address. And I'm sorry if I've missed that from previous reports. I don't think so, but I'm sure people will comment. I do remember a report in the autumn of this year about requiring an email address to applicants or residents who didn't have one. And I remember that because I remember being worried about it, because I have residents who don't have email addresses, or who were creating an email address for the first time solely for our benefit, because we told them that they had to. And I thought that the housing team dealt with that pretty well. I thought the issue of kind of access concerns was understood by residents, by staff, as being a problem. And that I know of residents who didn't want to set up an email address and were quite surprised about having to do that. And lots of times their family set them up for them. But there were people who were supported to do that by the team, particularly in the home choice part of the area. I'm thinking particularly rather than the management area. I thought that issue was kind of... I wish we hadn't factored in it, but I understand the reason I think the issue was dealt with pretty well. The issue of having to have a second one is nuts. We shouldn't be requiring that of residents. And it's... I take the point about not Bristolising things far too much, and I take the point about there being differences between different parts of the system, but there's no other part of my life where I have two email addresses for the same organisation. You know, if you know, my employer or my gym or my wine subscription, tells me something is changing in your account, something changes in my account, you can update that. It seems a really poor customer experience to require that. Yeah. So, is that it now? We're going to do that forever? But my particular question is that there must be access concerns about that. I'm surprised that we've decided to do that, and I'm not sure when we decided to do that. So I'd quite like to know kind of when we decided that was necessary, and what are we going to do about residents and applicants who are disadvantaged by that?
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. It is, it's obviously something that's had a very direct impact on a number of our residents, and it's caused an awful lot of concern and worry to people, frankly, as well, I think. Fiona, I think you really want to respond to this, don't you?
Thank you, Chair. I really sort of was very anxious to respond, because I wanted to say absolutely, and we acknowledge that. And thank you very much for your kind words and comments around how well it was handled by staff. I think it's important to say, and we've got, from a technical point, Charles can come and give us technical details, but just to say we recognise that, and the assurance is that which is why it's important that we go to the next upgrade of the system. In the upgrade, that is remedied. So it is remedied, and it doesn't exist in the upgrade. And I think you were right to say that, I think we were aware initially that we were going to have to get residents to set up a separate email account. I think it is something to do with NEC and the way the system was set up, which Charles can talk to and provide some greater detail. But just wanted to acknowledge how difficult that would be for many of our residents and citizens, and we acknowledge that, and those improvements will come with the next upgrade.
Yeah, and I think like you, I was made aware of that this year, my understanding of the reasoning for it is that yes, it's an awkward workaround, but that it's the solution that the team determined would prevent anyone from being disadvantaged, basically. So it would enable people to continue to make bids on the home choice system, rather than just not being able to at all, and therefore kind of missing out potentially on a home. So it's not been a great experience, as you say, for customers of the system, and for our residents, and it's not something that we are that we're happy with at all. So it is it's part of the reason why we're pressing ahead with the housing IT transformation program. Is we want to create a much more seamless experience for people. Charles, do you want to come in on the details of that?
Yeah, I'll come in. I'll give you a noddy explanation. It's worth noting when Bristol went live, they went live in October last year. In October, version 25.2, which is the version we're talking about, was available, but it would have been too risky to go live and upgrade at the same time because all the testing had been done on the previous version. So some of the issues we have now with asset management, which we've been talking about, and this issue here, wouldn't have been an issue if we had gone live maybe in July. We would have then put that upgrade in October, November. So what we're doing is the upgrade to version 25.2 is being planned and will be done in March, April. So this issue will go. We weren't aware of the severity of the issue with Paul and I until about 4 or 5 weeks ago and the impact it would have. And I totally understand everything's been saying. In communications, we've been trying to make sure the right communications go out to tenants accordingly. If I'm correct in saying all priority 1 people were contacted anyway, so anyone of a higher priority hasn't been disadvantaged on that particular situation. But this will be resolved in relation to that. It's worth noting as well, and one of the things we're trying to do as part of my role is to help Bristol get ready in this new world of business as usual and so on, is that Bristol are going to have to change and do 2 upgrades a year. And that's basically how NEC will work. And it's important that they keep that upgrade. So we're hand-holding this upgrade process now. And then Bristol will be able to carry on with these upgrades. NEC are very, put a lot of pressure on organisations, quite rightly, to make sure they upgrade quite quickly. So issues that come up like this can get resolved a lot quicker. But if we had gone live in July of last year, then this issue, we wouldn't be discussing it today because it would have been implemented as part of the latest upgrade, which is available now. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
It does. I think we need confidence that the same approach will be taken to resolving this issue, because applicants and residents could be really confused about this on an ongoing basis. You don't want to have 2 separate email accounts for 2 parts of your housing relationship with the same organisation. So residents who have been supported to create a new one will have to be supported to merge those 2 accounts in the future, and we will have to know how that information. And I don't know which of those accounts is the right one, because if we have a housing management account and an application account, it's not obvious which one of those is the master and which one of those is subsumed into the other one. So we have to be mindful of how that transition happens, and that we put good effort into resident and applicant communications about that. The other side to it, which is about the process of transition, is what doesn't come out here is do we have the right number of applicants? So has everyone who was on the previous registration successfully migrated to the new version, or are there people who haven't made that migration successfully?
Well, I'll come on to that second point. Let me first just go to the other point, because you raised a point very good about different memberships, why it says 2 email addresses. The reason is, although it is NEC, it's 2 different components of NEC actually provided by a third party. That's why there has to be a separate email address. But quite happy, Chair, to take this away as an action to make sure we see this through properly. In relation to the data, I can promise you we spent an awful long time in going through the data, checking, rechecking. So no applicants were lost going forward as part of that data migration process. So they were checked, rechecked, brought up to date. That we had a lot of multiple applicants on there, and we had legacy applications, so they were all merged and they were all up-to-date records, so no one was lost.
Thanks. I've got Councillor Stone next.
Well, I think it was only I remember the conversation that I kind of like sort of thought, well, there are some. You're the IT expert. I don't know. There may be some solutions, but usually, sometimes with software systems, email addresses can be generated. So, for example, I work for City of Bristol College, and every time a new student turns up at the college, guess what? They get a generated email address. So the student doesn't have to generate their own email address. They get one already generated for them if they want to use it or not. Was that not a possible solution?
I think we looked at that. We looked at that in relation to the possible options, but I think what we didn't want a situation where Bristol then would have to start managing people's email accounts and in issues and passwords and so on. We wanted someone to be able to try and we gave, I think, a number of different ways to be able to set up another, maybe a Gmail or a account and so on. What we didn't want is customers saying my password failed, and that would then create more problems. It is quite I would say, a unique issue, this, but it's the way that there are two separate, although they are NEC, there are two separate systems. But take this away, Chair, as an action to make sure we get this properly bottomed out, because, yeah, we can't have this going forward. But it should be resolved in 25 too, and obviously that's what we're doing.
Great, thanks. Councillor Gooch.
I'm a bit bamboozled by this whole thing, but is there anybody who is on the system who hasn't registered for a second email address and so can't access it? Because you migrated everything across and everything's migrated, but
would need to double check that. But anyone who, as of a high priority one, isn't it? Yeah, priority one, has been contacted. So anyone who is in the greater need has been contacted accordingly, so have not lost out on any opportunities for bidding.
Yes, sorry, just to clarify on that, we've phoned everybody in bands 1 and band 2 who hadn't registered to put a plan in place for them to register, recognising there's a lot of people in the lower bands who may be having issues but aren't really getting housed. Yep, so there's an issue, potential issues of access, but we just wanted to make sure we were getting to the people that may be missing out on offers and putting a plan in place. So lots of my resources within Housing Options was redirected to do that work over the last week or so.
Okay, can I just ask a follow-up? So when you get the next update, the issue is going to be sorted. Does that mean the second email will then not be required and they can go back to using their main email?
I think Councillor Logan's got a good understanding of this. This is where we're going to have the facility to merge records, the two accounts, separate accounts, one for the rent account and one for home choice. We've got the facility to create one account. You just need the one email address. So that's the process that we're going to have to go through. Make sure that we're working with, home choice applicants, agreeing which account we do, which email address, all the stuff that Councillor Logan talked about. So it's the facility to deal with the issue that comes with the upgrade. Then we need to do the work to merge the accounts and make things a lot clearer for everybody.
It's worth adding as well is that Bristol will be presented with these merged accounts, and then we'll have to decide each one what to do. So we're not going to do it automatically. We will do one at a time, and we'll probably contact residents, maybe say which email address you want to use and things like that. What the new version does, it manages what we call duplicate records. And this comes out because, obviously, of the data transfer from Civica and also the data transfer from Arbitras as well. So we had a lot of legacy data on there that had not been properly cleaned, is the best way to describe it.
It does sound like this is a huge amount of work to have to do because of this email issue.
It's manageable.
Okay. Because
we will contact residents and saying, we have two records for you. Which record do you wish to use going forward? But we will, Chair, we want to look at this properly in an action plan. We didn't fully become, Paul and I weren't fully aware of this issue until, as I say, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. A number of residents and tenants have been contacted and the issue has been resolved. But if there are more, then please let us know. I think at the height, we had about 700 calls, which have all now been resolved and so on. And actually, once someone has had their case resolved, then it is technically resolved going forward. But obviously, on the migration of records, we will need to look into this as part of the upgrade.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Bales.
I'm going to have a moan the same as everybody else, I think, about this new IT system. I'm not on home choice. I don't want to move. I'm quite happy where I am. I love my house, even though it does need some work. I'm not going anywhere. I can't check my rent account, so I don't know if that's connected. I have no idea if I'm in rent arrears, but I don't think I've heard anybody, any tenant or anyone in this room, but particularly tenants, say that this has been pleasant or great or that it's working. They're all talking about it on social media. I'm actually meeting with a relative of mine that's really struggling. They really want to move. They found a flat on Home Choice. They want to bid on it. They can't bid on it. They're really, really vulnerable, and they want me to try and help them fix this issue. So I haven't looked at the system, so I will try and help them. So if you've got any hints and tips, please let me know. But, you know, it's not like you can nip round the corner to a rent office and go and sort it out, because we don't have local rent offices. So then this vulnerable person that really struggles to get out the house, that keeps falling down the stairs, which is why they need to move, they then got to go to Temple Street. You know, that's not going to happen. Their mental health is as such that I have to keep phoning them and reminding them to even phone up and get a GP appointment. So, you know, there's no support out there for tenants to even sort these issues out. It's not been a huge success. And, you know, we all need digital upgrades. And, you know, I'm a complete and utter technophobe. So I don't know even if I can help them sort it out. So, you know, where do people go if they really struggle with things like that? And my other thing was, when tenants get letters about things like stop condition surveys, I have mine done just after Christmas, and, you know, I come to this committee and I can look up what it means. And but lots of tenants have no idea what some of these, because it's not just a stop condition survey. We have people coming into our homes to look at our electrics and God knows what else. Of course we do, we need that. But I was at a women's group about a week or two ago, and, you know, these women were asking me, and, you know, if the letter you get for your door is really vague, it's not really helpful, because you get a complete stranger coming into your house taking photos, or outside your house taking photos of your property, and it's a bit worrying.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gary. Let's take that point about the content of the letter away, shall we? And have a review of you know, make sure that it's in plain English and that sort of thing. And I think the other issue you're raising was around really sources of support and advice for people. So who would like to answer that? I can see quite a few people.
Shall I start then, Fiona? Yeah.
Do you want to start?
Or Paul? Do you want to do it?
Paul. Great.
Okay. Yeah. So Temple Street isn't great place location-wise for a lot of people, is it? But what we've arranged with colleagues who work in libraries is that they're able to assist people with these issues. So we've got, 27 libraries, mostly located in different parts of the city. Opening times vary, but they've been briefed and are aware of the issue. So if people are able to go down to a library at a time that's open, then they can get help there. But we've also got really competent people taking in our contact centre on the phones. So if somebody reaches out to the Home Choice number on the phone and they get through to somebody who can't help them on the phone, they will put a plan in place which might involve contacting my service. It may be a support worker comes out. So libraries, then phone. Okay, I'll phone the libraries, whichever one your resident wants to do. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can provide a bit of training if you like. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
What's coming next?
But in relation to your first point, though, that you can't access your current account at the moment.
So I have no idea whether I'm up to date with my rent, because I can't even log in and check for some reason. I've never had any issues before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, we are seeing a record number of residents accessing their account. Obviously, I'm very keen to make sure that every resident can access their account and so on. Can I just check, are we using the libraries as the same for residents as well, or what are we doing on that?
We didn't talk to them about rent accounts, but I'm sure that they're used to people going in and seeking help with all sorts of IT access issues, so for council services. Yeah, haven't specifically talked to them about that, but they'll be familiar with helping people log on. It's the same thing, My Bristol Housing. Yeah, for Home Choice and Rents, I think it should be the same process. Yeah.
Fiona, I think, also wants to
yeah,
come in.
thank you, Chair. I can see lots of people wanting to respond to this. And just to try and pull all of that together, I think, you know, I think your initial point was about where can residents go for support, and that this transition into our transformation into our new IT system has been quite challenging. And we recognise that. It's been challenging for our residents, for our stakeholders and citizens, and actually extremely challenging for staff. And I think these sorts of change IT programmes often are. One of the things I think we spoke about earlier on was about what, you know, we say it quite often, don't we? Lessons learned. There are lots of lessons that have been learned in this IT change programme, and they are, and I can assure you they're already being implemented, our learning, into how we adapt and how we approach the next phase and the phase that will come after that, and then what becomes our BAU, because as you've heard, we need to manage this change ourselves. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and accept the challenge it's been for both ourselves and for all of our residents and citizens. I think in terms of support, I think there's something around communication. So it's great that we know that that libraries are available to provide additional support. We need to make sure that, I'm sure we have messaged that and communicated it, but we need to continue to communicate it more widely, and we need to make sure that as councillors you know this, so that you have the right information to support your constituents when they approach you. So there's something to take away there really about how we're communicating what we do. I also just kind of wanted to touch on the stock conditions and those stock condition letters just dropping and sometimes being challenging. Recognise that. I think there's more we can do again around communication. So as I said, we are now doing our bi-monthly newsletters. We're always looking for useful information. Now, you know, for me, straight away I heard there's something we need to be writing about. What's a stock condition survey? You may get a letter. This is why they are in your home if you have concerns. So we can do something there. So for me, I will take that away, because what I'm hearing is it's about how we communicate the activities that we need to deliver on behalf of residents. So I'm going to take that away as well. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks. I've got, I think... sorry. As well.
Thank you, Chair. I've just wanted to pick up a little bit on what Fiona was saying about the stock condition letters. I smiled when you said it, because I thought you're exactly right. And yet I'll have a conversation with my team about no access. And it's the same with every compliance letter that we send. We send out these technical letters saying, we're going to come and do this compliance test in your home, electrical test or gas servicing. And then we wonder why we don't get in. So there's a huge benefit to us in working with them and working on those letters. So together we'll work on that, and we can do some more work on the website. Councillor Pete's point about talking to local community groups and things, you know, spreading the word about what that means, so that if somebody does talk to somebody that they're confident in talking to, they can say, you don't need to worry about that, I know exactly what it is, and explain that. So some really good points that we can pick up from there, so thank you.
Thanks very much. I've got Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I mean, I think first of all, talking about the IT system, I do acknowledge that kind of officers have consistently offered to share greater detail about the NE system, and that, you know, that we haven't taken it up. And I also want to thank Dan Aykroyd for kind of his persistence in kind of keeping this going. I'd also say that, you know, I don't understand the kind of the features of the system particularly well, but I kind of want to just say a few words about looking at this from an overall council system perspective. I mean, I think the first thing is it's inappropriate that the IT changes just get lumped into the housing consumer standards as an agenda item. This is needed to have its own agenda item all the way through, and we've consistently underestimated the importance and the impact of this. I think, you know, there has been insufficient professionalism in the project governance, and there's been inadequate reporting into this committee, and there's been inadequate change management on it. And, you know, some of these things we can now improve upon, and there are lessons for the council. Charles, you referenced a kind of lack of adequate budget at the start of the project, but then what you talked about was the fact that the scope had been inappropriate at the start, and that features that had been agreed at the start have now been dumped. So we don't know whether those features, as you talked about Bristolisation, and when you said there was Bristolisation, that presumably implied that there were features that in the Bristolisation which are now no longer possible because we're taking the standard offer that's delivered to the other 50 or so local authorities. So, we don't know whether those proposed features that have been lost are essential or not. And I do know from the HR committee that some of the feedback from the trade unions was that there are things that they used to be able to do on the old system, but which they can't do now. I think that what we've seen is a kind of vagueness and a lack of granularity about the original functional specification, the change controls, and the planning, which, of course, if you haven't got those things in place, you're going to get unexpected rises in budgets. So, we know that the data migration wasn't properly thought through. We've probably got higher data cleansing costs coming up now than were anticipated as a result of the sort of double email addresses and the like, and no doubt there'll be new costs coming with regards to data cleansing. So at a corporate level, I think that we need to learn from this, not just for this committee, but for the whole council. So I see the same challenges in the way that bring your own devices is being managed. And at a corporate level, we need standardised governance and reporting framework for IT projects. And we need to see, perhaps any software procurement over 30,000 a year or any IT capital project over £100,000 a year needs to conform with a kind of standardised reporting and governance framework so that we can actually be able to manage the introduction of complex IT systems in a digital world, not being surprised at every step that we're getting something that we hadn't expected. So I think for ourselves now, this has become what we thought might be a one-off. It's become a multi-stage project. So we do need to look quite a lot more carefully at how we are introducing better project discipline into what we now believe to be a multi-stage project. So obviously that needs to be taken out of this room and thought through, how do we get our reporting, governance, change control management up to higher standards that will work for us as a committee and where there can be some learning for the council as a whole.
Thanks, Jerome. I think Nick Hibbard, who's our Chief Executive, wanted to come in response to that. Nick.
Thank you, and thanks for allowing me to join your committee. Wouldn't normally be the case, but obviously because I'm providing support to the Housing Directorate whilst we're waiting for David McNulty to join us in a few weeks' time, I have been getting quite close to this. Interestingly, just whilst we've been having this debate, I've been using NEC, so just to give you a sense that I've actually been using it because of some changes that need to be made that reflect authorisation levels for an executive director. So I'm actually using it and learning from real experience. I also yesterday spent time with staff at Sandy Park, with the repairs staff, to hear their real experience, and with the trade unions as well. And I've been receiving the daily updates from Charles and the team in relation to programme management. I fully accept your challenge in relation to the frustrations that both staff and residents will be feeling with using the new system. Unfortunately, and this is not an excuse, but unfortunately, this is the third time in my career that I've had some involvement in the rollout of an NEC system. Wasn't always called NEC. It's been called ANITE. It's been called OHMS, and in 3 different councils. And you could speak to a number of councils, and I think the number of 150 currently using NEC has been used today, and it is normal, although regrettable, that you get this level of problems when so much data is transferred onto one system. If you think 27,000 homes, 20-odd thousand people on a housing register, loads of repairs, etc., the level of data that's being transferred is huge. So actually, some of the successes have been that the migration of data has been pretty successful, and actually much more successful sometimes than other experiences. And you only have to have a simple problem, like in one part of the system an address being GFF, and in another part of the system the address being ground floor flat, that suddenly you've got duplication of data, and all of that has to be cleansed, and it's huge. So the scale of the challenge makes the chances of success first time really challenging, and it just unfortunately doesn't happen. It hugely frustrates me that we are in a system in the public sector where all councils use the same systems, and often the whole of the public sector use the same systems. This is not a comment on NEC, but it's a comment about IT generally, and yet somehow we're not able to use our bulk procurement power to be able to get systems that are much easier to roll out. So just firstly, just to recognise the challenge that there is. I would say that there is governance around the programme. There is a corporate digital board, and there is a process around change control. I suspect, but I don't know because it was way before my time, that when the programme was first set up, that the enormity of it perhaps wasn't scoped as much as it should have been, and there will no doubt be lessons that we can learn from that. But just to reassure you that we are very focused on making sure that we do address the challenges that we do it at pace, that we ensure that there's a clear feedback loop so that when either staff or residents are raising issues, we're explaining to them what we're doing to address them. It will take time. That's always the case. And we were speaking with the social housing regulator. I've met with the social housing regulator, and they are not surprised that there are these challenges, because I know that certainly in my last council, the same conversations took place with the social housing regulator when NEC was rolled out there in 2020, 2023 and 2024. So just to reassure you that not only as a user, but also as the chief exec, I will be having some oversight just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to roll this out in a way that works really effectively, both for the Housing Directorate, but also for service users.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for that assurance and for that context as well. I said earlier that I've been, frankly, too relaxed about timings. That continues to be the case, I'm afraid. I've got hands from 3 people at the moment before we come to the end of this item. So I'm going to propose that we take Councillor Peake, Councillor Shabalala, and then Councillor Stone, and then move on to the next item. If members could try and keep their questions brief and officers keep their responses similarly brief, that would be really appreciated. My bad, though.
I just wanted to thank Nick for going to see the staff at Sandy Park and meeting the 2 unions. For Jerome and I, we both sit on the HR committee, and it's something that comes there quite a lot. So genuinely, it's really good news to see that our chief exec is actually getting involved and meeting with those people. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Harry. Councillor Shabalala.
Yeah, thanks. It's not my question, but just thanks for the points that you raised. I personally do feel that there should have been a user test involving us as stakeholders, and that's been completely missed. So what this program has been feels so void that what we get is from residents, and it makes it even more of an issue because of that lack of user testing. But anyway, I think a specific brief would be well appreciated. My question is around milestone 2 completion and the basis that Savile would be the external validator before we go to the regulator. So if at that point we can still see that the data of the NEC, the digital data and the physical data are not aligning, and we go to the regulator, are we expecting this to have to be a consistent improvement or to be a failure for internal control and data systems? Because we're chasing a timeline, right? Yeah, April,
Yeah.
So
yeah, so just a little bit of context on Milestone 2. So Milestone 2 is taken from our Housing Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy. That is our strategy. We own that. We have presented it to the regulator and have noted it, but it's ours. We own it. What the regulator is interested in is to see that we're making progress. We understand where we are. We're managing risk and we're making improvements. So I think regarding Milestone 2, when we're clear where we are, I think the most important thing is that we fully understand where we are. We are open where there are more things to do, which there will be. You know, we're on a journey where there's still a lot to do before residents consistently feel the improvements in services. I think we can all be open and honest about that. So when we've done our review, Savills have done their assessment, it's likely that there'll be some extra things that we need to add in, as long as we're clear and we show that journey to yourselves, to our residents and to the regulator. It'll be fine. But I think the important thing is just that continual improvement and that we own it. Because I think it's important to say it's not that the regulator are dictating that we have to do X, Y, and Z. They want to see us deliver our plan.
So where we are we anticipating that by the time the reports comes in, we would be in a position to go to the regulator, or are we thinking that this needs to be delayed because of the issues we're experiencing with the IT system?
Yeah, we meet with the regulator every month. So we'll give them an update next week on where we are with things. I think some of the data challenges will require additional work and additional action. So an example I'll give you is around the repairs data. So we're reporting about 20,000 repairs. We were down at 8,000 before the NEC system. That is clearly something that has happened to us that we need to effectively respond to, which will probably be additional actions that go into our improvement plan. And I think what the regulator wants to see is we're being agile and responding to things that happen, because things do happen, don't they? And I think that's what they're more interested in.
Thanks. Councillor Stone.
Yeah, I'm still going to come back to the cap gas situation. I just want to put it into real-term context. If I have a capped gas situation of more than 3 months, that means in that 3 months, me as a person will be going without heating possibly and without hot water. I just want everybody to imagine what that would feel like, especially over cold winter nights. We had this conversation before, and I'm still trying to figure out what the solution is. I thought the solution, again, was to allow, because often these capped gas scenarios come about because gas engineers go in, they can't do the gas safety test because there's no gas on the meter, and therefore they have to cap it. I understand the reason why. They can't show that the gas pipe is safe, therefore they have to cap it off. Now, there are solutions to this, and I was assuming that we'd have these solutions here in this report today. Those solutions could be going to places like Citizens Advice Bureau or directly to the energy companies, where our engineers can override the gas delivery to complete the test, so we don't have to actually cap the gas off. Now, I don't see why we can't have these solutions. They're quite quick, easy solutions, and why we can't just go ahead with them. I'm also, I'm actually, basically, let's listen to your reply.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. I think Fiona is going to respond.
Thank you, Chair. So, acknowledging the concerns that you've presented about cap gas, and quite right, Councillor, I know that you presented a concern in a previous meeting, and we took an action to come back with a detailed plan, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that we haven't provided that. It's not an excuse, but I think it's acknowledged that we seem to have been between two directors of property, and the previous director of property, who was with us for a short period, took that action to go away and deep dive and actually solutionise and provide an action plan that provides solutions to the issues. What I can say is there is work that's started in this space, but I do think Sian, well, I know that Sian it's one of her actions, and she's going to engage and get sort of into the weeds on this. The property team are working closely with the housing team at the moment, looking at the data, understanding to ensure that is our data correct. So, as you say, some of those capped gas activities is understanding the data. Some of the individuals will be people who have made an active choice to have the gas cap because they have secondary heat source. So it's understanding what is that number, what does that look like, take that out of the data, what are we left with? Is it an issue around affordability? What's our remedy? What do we put in place to enable that us to complete the gas action, so we're not capping, and what is the routine in which we routinely go back and approach our clients where we've capped gas. All of that work needs to be in an action plan. So work has started, but I do agree that we need to do better and be better at it. One of the other things we are doing is making sure that we are really working on using our access policy. So we shouldn't just be capping gas. What we should be doing is getting access injunctions where necessary rather than capping from the outside. And if we use and follow our policy, and there's been a push to look that we are using the policy, then that in itself will reduce the amount of people that we cap. There's always that balance around safety for the resident and the wider block and the individuals, but there is a process that should mean that we should be following our access injunctions and injunct so that we can access rather than having to cap in the first place. So there's a whole pool of work, and I can see that that Sian's anxious to come in to give you an update on what she's done already in the few weeks that she's been here. Thank you, Sian.
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, it's something that I've been anxious about for several years working in the sector. And I know that if I didn't work in property in the housing sector, I wouldn't even know that gas capping was a thing. So the consequences for people who, like you rightly said, have their gas cap, but also the impact it has on our buildings. If we're not heating those properties, then they're more susceptible to damp and mould, which then adds more for customers. I'm quite surprised that we have been capping. It is old school, and as Fiona said, we are working now more closely with the team to make sure we start the process in time. It gives us plenty of time to go in and talk to customers and say what support do they need for us to do that. The point about gas engineers having cards and topping up isn't as simple as it sounds. We always have no end of problems. Some places where accept company credit cards to pay for top-ups and all sorts of things, but it's something that I've asked the team to look at. We know, for example, that the numbers have gone down because in the previous iterations, the numbers you've seen in the form included void properties, which should be capped. Those are the ones that should be capped. So we've taken those out now. I think it's gone down to 316. Fiona's team have started having conversations with customers now that have got capped gas and to understand why and what support we can give. We will be also looking at what other heating systems people have got in those to understand whether or not actually there is another secondary source in there and that properties are supported. But it goes back to the point we said about our letters as well. In those letters that we send to say we're coming to do a gas safety check, we need to explain what that is, why it's important, and the conditions that we need, and give people the opportunity and the information they need that if they haven't got, they can't afford to put gas on their meter, that they can get that help before we go. And also where we know we've had properties that have previously been capped, how can we use the new IT system to flag that to us so that we can make some phone calls in advance? So there's a lot of work we can do, and we will bring something back that gives you that assurance of what the plan is to reduce those numbers. But hopefully by the time we come back, you will see some of those numbers reduced as well.
Will that be the next committee that we see this?
Yes, we'll make a commitment to do that.
Can I just... Oh, thank you. Yeah, can I just add that you can actually put the money on the back of the meter, not the front. So obviously, if somebody's got accumulated £100 worth of debt, you can put the money on the back of the meter, so you're not actually you don't have to wipe out the debt. I'm sure you understand that that's a possibility.
There is some work you can do with the supplier to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I think Charles briefly wanted to come in on that, and then I am going to move
just want to come in for just 10 seconds, Chair, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Welcome all of you being here today, obviously councillors. I'm more than welcome for you to reach out to me at any time if you have any questions and so on about the obviously the programme. Welcome to come back to Housing Committee again, 10th of April, to go for anything. I think it's just worth in carrying on that dialogue as we go through this particular programme. There's just two things I just want to clarify very quickly. On the point you made, Councillor, was about the Bristolisation point. I think it's important to clarify this. Money wasn't lost, but time was lost in relation to how Bristol wanted to adapt and implement the product rather than the standard offering that was made. Points Nick was raised, I totally agree. Going back to Anite, that's over 35 years, Nick, so I know that product as well. So, yeah, so I think it's worth noting that there have been some lessons learned. I think one of the biggest lessons learned is that more external support could have come in at a later date to have, because there was very much an insular view when I came in June, and that's, I think, why some of the problems are now. But welcome for you to reach out, talk to me about anything and everything, and I'm here at your disposal, councillors. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. And we'll share Charles's information with the committee. I am going to move us on now because we've got two further items to get through, and we've got maybe 15 minutes for each of them now. So I'm going to read out the officer recommendations, and then we're going to move on to the next item. Thanks. So the recommendations are that the committee notes and comments on the Housing Consumer Standards Programme update, on the latest landlord compliance performance report, on the Housing IT Transformation Programme update, the Residents' Voice Action and Feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, the upcoming Conduct Standard, and the update from the latest regulatory review meetings with the regulator of social housing. So let's take it that report is noted. Agenda item 11 is the Tackling Homelessness Programme quarterly update. This report provides an update on the progress of the Tackling Homelessness Transformation Programme and is for information only. The officer recommendations can be found on page 77, and I'm gonna allow no more than 20 minutes for this item, so we'll finish up by 1:45. I'm going to invite Paul Sylvester, Head of Housing Options, to introduce this report. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. And it feels like we've been talking about this a lot already today. So this is the latest quarterly update on the programme for noting. As a reminder, the Tackling Homelessness programme includes various initiatives with the aim of improving outcomes for people who are experiencing homelessness whilst reducing the spend on temporary accommodation. The programme team and colleagues across housing work with determination and passion in progressing multiple initiatives in what is a very challenging and complicated space. I have one of those colleagues with me today, Joe White, who is the programme manager for the Tackling Homelessness programme, is here, and I'm sure we'll be able to answer any detailed questions if they come up. I'll give a brief overview of the report. The report follows the same format as previous quarterly reports with some additional benchmarking information. I know that people were keen on seeing how we compare to other local authorities. There is a usual progress update from paragraph 4 for the following projects: our increasing supply of TA, new use of registered providers, update on the council-owned registered provider, increasing access to private rented sector accommodation. And in that one, I just want to point out that the numbers there are old. We've actually housed 130 families and 391 single people in affordable private rented accommodation this financial year so far. Work on homelessness prevention and our work around youth homelessness, which is joint with colleagues in Children's Services. The new benchmarking section starts at paragraph 28 and compares 3 key measures. Temporary accommodation per 1,000 population, and you can see that we're the 3rd highest after Brighton and Manchester. Percentage of applications where a prevention duty is accepted, and this is an area of focus. We're not doing as well as we'd like to here, and we'll be shortly visiting Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, who are doing good work in this space. And our successful prevention of homelessness when we've accepted a prevention duty, and that is something that we're pretty good at, and we're doing better than comparable local authorities. So when we get to see people early, we're good at preventing homelessness. The programme costs of savings start from paragraph 34, and in terms of our forecast on savings, there is under-delivery on 3 of the savings, which is compensated by over-delivery on others. And I'm pleased to say that we're forecasting to achieve the total amount committed in the Council's medium-term financial plan. Pass back to you, Chair, and any questions? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. And yeah, I think we asked for those benchmarking figures to be included in this report because I think it does highlight something that's quite interesting about Bristol in relation to some of our peer local authorities, which is that, as Paul said, we have a relatively low proportion of homelessness prevention duties accepted. What that means is that that we see people probably closer to crisis point than we would like to in many cases, but that when we are able to achieve really good prevention outcomes. So we're able to prevent people from becoming homeless when they approach us early enough, and that performance has improved enormously over the last couple of years and is now better than our comparable authorities. So there's a bit of a puzzle there about why we don't see people earlier on, and I think there's something that we need to focus on, probably with our partners as well, about that. But actually, when people do approach us, we can help, and I think that's something that's really important, that we kind of share that message with people. That if you are concerned about your housing, if you're concerned that you're at risk of becoming homeless, please do contact us, because we can help, we can make a difference. I also just wanted to highlight, because we discussed it earlier, that this committee approved up to 180 homes every year to be transferred from our general needs housing stock to temporary accommodation. We've achieved really good outcomes over the last year without using all of that. So we've actually transferred far fewer. We've 126 in the previous year. So we're achieving really good outcomes without having to without using more of those general needs homes, which means that when we come to sort of wind down that program, it will be easier to do so. I'm going to go to questions and comments now, and I'm going to start with Councillor Peat.
Thank you. I was thinking maybe I could provide some clarity on why a lot of the time councils, and not just our own, will essentially only really get in touch with people around the crisis point of homelessness. And that's due to the way that hopefully will be amended when we get the Renters' Rights Act. But it's due to the legal distinction between voluntary homelessness versus actual homelessness. So if you, in the current system, say you get a Section 21 eviction, you are not considered homeless if you leave that property at the point of your eviction date. The guidance is that you stay in that property, and then you'll get your court hearing for the to leave, and then you're advised to then stay in that property further right up until the point where bailiffs come to take you out. That is the point when you are legally considered homeless. If you leave your property prior to that point, you are not considered homeless. If you leave your property prior to that point, you are considered voluntarily homeless, and therefore you're not entitled, a lot of the time in a lot of different councils, I'm not sure if it's the case in this one, but in a lot of different councils, that you're not entitled to council housing if you're voluntary homeless. And so this is where a lot of the issues arise with homelessness support, and why we only tend to see people at crisis point, because you might, in the current system, have got your Section 21 eviction and been like, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to reach out to my council. But a lot of councils legally cannot do anything until you are actually homeless. And so I'm not angry at anyone here, so to speak. It's something that I think, not only we as a local authority, but hopefully, with the new Renters' Rights Act, will really be able to address. Obviously, Section 21s will be banned. So the main issues we're going to have to deal with is rent increases and Section 8 evictions. But with Section 8, obviously, you've got your, I think it's 12 pre-selected compulsory and the word I can't think of, other reasons for eviction. But that is one of the reasons why we only see people at crisis point.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking about the Renters' Rights Act in the next item as well. But I think, Paul, would you like to come back on our how we approach our homelessness prevention duties and what happens?
I'd like to talk a little bit about that and maybe clarify how things happen in Bristol. There's a distinction here between when we provide temporary accommodation for people and when we start working with them to prevent their homelessness. We love it when people come to us early, particularly in the private rented sector, because that gives us more opportunity to work with the landlord, get some support in and try and turn the decision around from serving notice and getting them to leave. But I think what you're referring to is the point at which we offer temporary accommodation where all hope is lost and that situation isn't resolved. We can provide temporary accommodation earlier. Lots of people that we work with prefer to stay in their home for as long as possible. So it's a balanced decision that people make around the sort of stress and anxiety of being there up until the bailiff's point, get there, versus going into TA somewhere in the city that takes them out of their roots and away from support networks, etc. So we love it when people come to us early, because we need time to work with landlords and with them to deal with the underlying issues of why they're being made homeless. And I think Renters' Rights gives us more time to do that, which is brilliant, which is absolutely brilliant. And it's something we're thinking about the different services that we need to bolster to provide that support to both tenants and landlords to reduce the amount of homelessness that comes out of people that are homeless from the private rented sector. But yeah, there's different practices across the country in this. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paul. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Paul, for the report. Lots of good information here. This is something Bristol does well. So I think you described it really well, what we're doing. I have two questions, one about general needs as TA and one about the potential of the council RSL. So on general needs as TA, I'm assuming someone looks at the density of those things so that we don't use too much general needs in the same place. Because this is not a covert operation. Residents notice when someone arrives with some furniture. And I talked to a resident the other day, a couple of weeks ago, who described herself as sandwiched, meaning that two of her close neighbours, the properties were used as TA, and that has an impact on people. So it's important that we don't do that too often. And it's important that as councillors, when people ask us those things, that we are able honestly to say, it's not just in this area. This is spread across the city, and we try and use that effectively. I think that is supposed to be the case, but I would like advice on how we decide which properties are used for TA in that way. And I hope a quicker question on. Okay, do you want to answer that question first?
Turned it off and on. We're very mindful of how much temporary accommodation we use in particular areas. We also know that we have higher amounts of vacant properties in certain parts of Bristol, so there is a tension there. I think one of the things I remind people of, these are just families, these are just people that need accommodation. They're not any different to the people that end up in council housing. In fact, they will be the new council housing tenants. So whether it's a TA or not shouldn't really make a difference, right? They're just people who need to live somewhere in Bristol. But we are mindful of density. We are mindful of that people. Like you say, it's not a covert. It's really good description. It's not a covert operation, right? Everyone knows, don't they? They're expecting the council property to be let, and then something different happens to it. So we've got data on that, and that can be shared if that's helpful. Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay.
So, thank you, Chair. I was just merely going to add to that in terms of specifically when we're thinking about TA, where we are converting our accommodation to temporary accommodation, the lettings manager is very on top of that data, actually, in terms of making sure that we make every effort to spread it out across the city. And mostly, as Paul has said, let's not forget the residents that we place in TA are residents of ours of the future and or another social housing provider. Often the only reason that they're in temporary accommodation is because unfortunately the circumstances are such that their housing need has become a priority. They aren't necessarily residents that are, I think, all too often they're seen as residents that are more challenging to manage, and that generally isn't always the case. So I think it's also just worth being aware of that and remembering it's quite important. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Fiona. Back to you, Robin.
And my quick question is on the Council RSL. Seems like a good idea. Been kicking around for a while. Yeah. So I'm not totally sure what the next steps are. So we've said we've commissioned an organisation to provide us some advice on the business case for it, which seems like a good idea. I think the report says it's coming to SNR in May 25, yeah. So I'm assuming that means May 26. But it shouldn't be a surprise to this committee. So when we are able to say something in terms of what the plan is, I think this committee would want to be consulted on it, because it's a thing we want to be a Bristol success.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rob. Who would like to respond on that, on the particularly on the decision pathway and how this committee is going to be kept up to speed on what is happening?
Yeah. So the project is, as you say, working with an organisation called 3110 who are developing the outline business plan, and at the same time the project management team are developing a full business case alongside that, so the two documents are kind of alongside each other, and that is on the decision pathway for committee for May at the moment. We are making sure that we're really, really thorough in this with all of we've got a lot of kind of legal advice that needs to go into there, financial advice that needs to be understood and kind of, interpreted and put into that business plan and full business case. So we are aiming for May, but there's a chance we may need to take a little longer depending on what that advice comes back as and people reviewing it. But I think the plan is to come to PCCB for this committee as well as going to PCCB. So as we go through the decision pathway, although the decision's being made at Strategy and Resources Committee, we aim to keep both committees updated. So obviously it's key for you to understand.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take an action to make sure that we have a briefing for all of the members of this committee. I saw a number of hands go up at the same time. I've only got trying to keep it at 5 minutes more on this item. I think I saw Kerry and Caroline and Jerome, or was it Sibs? I'm going to start with Kerry. But if everyone could be as brief as possible, that would be really appreciated, because I think some of us at least need to get out of here at 1 o'clock.
My question was about something Paul pointed out in his speech last night about the way you count street homelessness. So obviously you get sofa surfers and lots of different types of homelessness, but he said that the council actually goes out and counts rough sleepers. Mm-hmm. So if you're not in the right place at the right time when they go out, you don't get counted in those statistics. So surely there's a better way of doing it, because they must be known to services somewhere within the council or partners that, who we work with. But so that just seems a bit bizarre. Why would you use that method of going round and physically counting them?
Yeah. So the council works with St Mungo's to do a regular nightly, what's called the street count, of people who are found bedded down on the streets in Bristol. It's something that you can volunteer to join, and I'd really recommend that people do it. It's an extraordinary experience, and I've learnt a vast amount by joining the outreach workers on the street count. You get to meet people who are who are living on the streets, and some people are incredibly generous with sharing their experiences and their stories with you, and you also get the experience of working with, or walking alongside St Mungo's outreach workers with their vast experience. Thoroughly recommend that if you're able and you're interested, that volunteers are always needed for it. So it's something that's well worth doing. I'm going to hand over to Paul, if that's all right, to respond on the sort of the rationale and how we go about trying to understand the our rough sleeping numbers.
It is a good point, because it feels quite basic, doesn't it, going around and literally counting people? But it is the methodology that all local authorities do, particularly for the annual count. But St Mungo's are out every single day, and early morning, late at night, walking the streets, engaging with people that are rough sleeping. So we know where people are rough sleeping, and we know where they rough sleep, where they're likely to rough sleep, and people tend to rough sleep where there's more than one person for safety, that sort of thing. But there's lots of other information that we gather around people sleeping rough. We did a very extensive women's census recently. We looked at all different types of rough sleeping. So the definition is somebody who's bedded down, but there are other situations where services will feed in that they know that people are staying in situations that are unhealthy relationships, they're sex working, they're on at the coach station sitting up, there's various different things. We're looking at all avenues to making sure that we're capturing one of this most vulnerable groups, homeless groups in the city. The other thing to say is that, and just use this opportunity to say that it's not a fixed group of people either. There's about 1,200 people every year who end up on the streets for at least one night. But at any one night, if you go out, you might see 70, and not everybody sleeps rough all the time. Sometimes people might find somewhere to stay a couple of nights, but are out more often. So as well as the people that are out every night, we're working together with St Mungo's and other partners with a targeted group of around about 200 people that we're really looking to find solutions for. But I get what you're saying. It does on the face of it seem a bit of an odd way of going about things. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. If it's all right, I'm going to go to Caroline very briefly, and then move us on to our next item, because we've got 15 minutes left.
Sorry.
I would really rather not, because I think not only officers but also members will have other places to go, and it's already a very long meeting. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the meeting's scheduled until 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Sorry, so I wanted to ask about the helping people into private rented sector, because obviously the Beam project fell through. Have we got anything to replace it?
So the Beam, us working with Beam, that didn't work. That was an external organisation who came into Bristol to do two things: support people in the private sector, but also help them into work. They started working in Bristol, and they just realised it was really difficult to support people into private rented accommodation in Bristol. It's business as usual work for my team. Anyway, the thing that they were coming, which was different, was that supporting people into work. So we do that. There's a team of 10, 12 people who work with landlords to support people into private rented. So we do miss it. We hoped it would be an opportunity, but it didn't come to pass. But that's why I was saying earlier, like the 130 families and the 391 single people that we've helped into the private rented sector is work that the team within the council has done. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to move us on now. I'm going to read the officer recommendations and then go to our final item. So the recommendations are that the committee notes, the report states that the Tackling Homelessness Programme's financial objectives include £8,205,000 of recurring subsidy loss reduction in 25-26, and a further 263,000 of recurring cost reduction on children's commissioning. The programme continues to work on additional initiatives that will result in further subsidy loss reduction. The report states that as per approval of the transformation funding at Strategy and Resources Committee on the 19th of May 25, the programme's revenue budget is £1,925,947 for the 25-26 year, plus the rollover of 792,000 from 24-25 that was not spent. giving a total of £2,717,947 plus 385,000 contingency, which is held centrally by the Transformation Board. The committee notes that no revenue funding has yet been approved for 26-27, but the programme will make a request at this committee in April, assuming transformation funds have been approved as part of the budget setting process, which they have. So that report is to be noted. And let's move on to agenda item 12, which is the Renters' Rights Act. This report provides an update on the new Renters' Rights Act 2025 and the impact the new legislation will have on the city and council. It's a non-key decision, so I'm going to be asking for a vote in a minute, as there are 2 officer recommendations to endorse, which can be found on page 84. I'm going to invite Tom Gilchrist, Head of Service for Private Housing, Accessible Homes and Travellers, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report, as Barry's outlined, is to update you on the provisions of the Renters' Rights Act, which received royal assent in October last year. It's probably one of the largest changes to local authority powers and duties affecting the private rented sector since 1988. You know, so nearly 38 years. This is the biggest change to affect the sector. And it's about trying to, the Act is trying to reform the way the rented sector operates in England. The primary aim of the Act is to address issues of unfair evictions, high rental costs and poor living conditions by providing stronger protections for tenants with the aim of creating a fairer and stable rental market. There are considerable changes in powers and duties on local authorities, and these are shown as impacts on both tenants, landlords and on the city councils in the report, which I hope members have been able to read. The changes are being introduced on a phased basis, and the first phase comes in on the 1st of May this year, and that is where the significant changes around rental reform takes place. Second phase takes place later this year, we think towards the end of 2026, and there will be a third phase, possibly as long as 2035, when the Decent Homes Standard 2 is applied to the private rented sector. So just to give members a very brief overview of some of the changes that are coming in. There will be the abolition of the Section 21 no-fault eviction power, preventing tenants being evicted without a valid reason. The tenants will then be converted, their tenancies will be converted to periodic tenancies. Landlords will only be able to increase rents at once every 12 months, and the Act will be banning bidding wars for accommodation in the private rented sector. There is a proposed introduction of a private landlords database that is proposed to be introduced towards the end of 2026. And as I mentioned earlier, the Decent Home Standard 2 will be applied to the private rented sector, as you know, and that will be a standard similar to that currently applicable to the social housing sector. So in preparation for the introduction of the Act, the first part of the Act in May, we have been distributing significant amounts of information out to the private rented sector organisations operating in Bristol, as well as private landlords and agents. Significant training is underway, organised nationally, as well as support with quite a wide-ranging communications plan that will be operating not just in Bristol, but working with the MCA potentially across the wider sub-regional market across the west of England. So this, because these powers apply to all rented homes across England. I'd like to ask members whether they have any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think it's important to recognise this as a something of a watershed moment for renters in Bristol and across the country. You know, I mean, I have my differences with the government, as you'd expect, as a member of a different party, but I think this is an excellent piece of legislation and is the biggest transformation, the biggest boost to renters' rights in over a generation. I want to assure members that this council be grabbing the opportunities that it presents with both hands, using the new burdens funding that's made available to us, and our own resources and those of our partner organisations to bring the biggest benefit that we possibly can to renters in this city. That includes things like working with organisations like Housing Matters and others to do a really sort of substantial campaign of public information and information to support organisations across the city who are able to provide support and advice to renters as well as to landlords, to make sure that that really we are that we're keeping renters apprised of all of the new rights that they're going to have. So yeah, this is really good news, and I think we are looking to use this as a springboard as well to develop our new private rented sector strategy over the coming months as well. So I'd like to hand over to the panel for questions and comments, and I'm going to start with Kerry, Councillor Bales.
Thank you for the lovely comments about our government. It goes to show that when you have a government that understands the needs of the people, they want them to vote for us, they can get it right. So for me, the rule that makes it illegal to discriminate against tenants receiving benefits or those with children or have pets, like, why has that even been a thing for so long? You know, we're not all reprobates. You know, people on benefits, we pay tax, we do everything, we go to work, we're not that different from anybody else, but we're quite often othered, and this will hopefully put a stop to it.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. Councillor Logan.
I also think that renters reform is a good idea, and I'm not going to spend any time talking about that. I wanted to ask a couple of questions on the report and what it's trying to do. And I think for the first time in my life, I'm going to criticise the report for being too short. That's not a pattern. The report recommendation is to endorse an approach. I'm not really sure we've set out what that approach is. I think we've said this thing is happening. Some good analysis of what that is and what we'll have to do. I don't think we've really got to the point of knowing exactly what that approach is. I think we're just kind of starting to work out the implications, because the recommendation 2 says endorse an approach to revise the private sector housing strategy, which I think is a good idea, but that's the first time in the report that is mentioned. Yeah. It's just that one line. Yeah. And the report. You know, the report from the advice from the legal officer is that this report is for noting. So, and this is an update on what's happening and be apprised of it. Of course it is. It's a fantastic area of work, and we're doing the right thing. I'm not sure if that is the purpose of the report. Is it just that, or is it to say we have an approach that we now want to implement? Because if it is, I don't think we've really set out exactly what that is, and we might need some. I think it's just a kind of position statement in terms of the point in time, and I think you're planning to come back when you've developed that approach to explain what it is in more detail, but it's not quite clear what the committee's being asked to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's
yeah. So
a challenge,
yeah,
it?
Just so to answer your question, Councillor, it is basically just giving an overview, because as somebody said, this is a short report. The Renters' Rights Act contains an awful lot of changes and duties on us as the local authorities, and those duties are quite wide-ranging and quite significant for us as an organisation, and it will take us time to work out how we're going to use those new powers and those new duties that we have. So the report does highlight in the recommendation that work is underway on reforming and bringing forward a new private rented sector strategy, which will be coming to the committee in the autumn, early autumn. The reason that has been delayed is that we were awaiting for the final information on the Renters' Rights Act, which didn't receive royal assent, and some of the guidance didn't come out until the end of last year. So that has delayed the private rented sector strategy, where we will be, and I can tell you because I pressed go yesterday on this, we will be consulting on a new civil penalty policy, which will need to come to committee, and that will go live early next week. So consulting tenants, landlords and others about how we will use these new powers and duties to improve the rented sector by levying quite significant penalties and charges on landlords for not complying with the legislation. But as I said, that's a consultation that will go through, and then obviously following the consultation, a report will be brought back to committee. So at this stage, this is just a general overview of the powers and the duties coming out of the Act. As I've said, there is a significant amount of training going on both for my teams, but also for housing options services, because obviously, as was alluded in an earlier item, Paul's team placed people into the PRS, and obviously landlords that they're working with need to be aware of their rights and responsibilities and our duties towards those tenants as well. So there's a significant amount of work going on this. This is just a position statement for the moment and for information for committee of where we are as an organisation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Tom. I think what I'm hearing from Rob is that I think there is a desire for some more flesh on the bones of this, really, though, isn't there? And I think perhaps what we should be doing is looking to arrange a briefing or perhaps a workshop with members of this committee so that we can talk a little bit more about the shape of the development of this new strategy and how we're going to go about developing it, and the sorts of aims and outcomes that we're looking to achieve. Would that be helpful, Rob and others? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Thank you. I've got Councillor Shabalala next.
Well, it's one, and this won't give you a 1-minute answer. But nonetheless, I do see the positive in this, but I also see a tremendous negative to it, especially for landlords that have got 1 or 2 properties, in terms of the cost implications that they may have, either choosing to sell properties or really make it unaffordable for some, because then they've got much more for knock-on impact. And I just wonder, because we can see this in terms of having the ombudsman and what that means for the social housing sector, but when it comes to the private sector, I'd be more interested really in the equalities impact assessment of this work, to really understand the knock-on impact on people that are renting. What would that have on temporary accommodation? What would that have on exclusivity of, pay to access? What would that have on people with rights to remain? All of that kind of stuff. I think, I've got a love and hate relationship with this, but I'd wonder how you guys are scoping out what you need to do and how the sector will respond. So I'm interested in the consultation massively, because, yeah.
I'm happy to help respond to that. So just to reassure, I'm Nikki, Deputy Head of Policy, Strategy and Public Affairs, and I'm working with Tom, as is my team, to pull together that private rented sector strategy, and happy to do a workshop with the committee in the next couple of weeks on how we shape this work going forward. To reassure you, we're front-loading the EQIA, so we're doing that currently, so we can really cognizant of the wider impacts of the changes through the Renters' Rights Act and how that's going to need to interplay into the private rented sector strategy we're developing. So at the workshop we're planning to do with the committee, we can bring some of that information forward and use that data to have a discussion on that front as well.
And right. just to add to impact on tenants, certainly what we have seen so far is that we have not seen a massive rush of landlords in Bristol leaving the sector, small or large sector. There will always be turnover with landlords managing properties in the city, but we've not seen large numbers of people presenting at Temple Street yet, around landlords using Section 21 while it's still available up until the end of May, at the end of April, sorry. So, I think the reality is Bristol has always had quite a vibrant, quite a large rental sector. And although these new powers and duties, I think for some landlords might push them out the market, I imagine they will be replaced with larger, more portfolio landlords who are able to cope and manage with these changes. So that's the current position, but obviously I think the closer we get to the introduction on the 1st of May, we will start to see whether that landscape changes going forward.
Okay. Right, thanks everybody. So mindful of time, and it is 1 o'clock now. So I'm going to move on to the report recommendations. Now, we've got 4 recommendations here, two of which for noting, and the other 2 are for endorsing as a non-key decision. Now, what I'm proposed to do, bearing in mind the reservations that Rob's raised about being asked to endorse something when you're not at all clear of what it is, I'm going to propose that we take them separately. So, I'm going to ask the committee. First of all, just to note recommendations 3 and 4. I know it's out of order, but and then we can take a vote on whether we endorse recommendations 1 and 2. Does that sound all right to everybody? Okay. I think the challenge with coming back with more detail is that we would then need to take another paper through the decision pathway, so it would be quite a long period before we could get back to it, by which point we will hopefully be in development of the private sector strategy. So it was probably...
Thank you. So, yes, appreciate the slight confusion here. So the paper is for information, but because the officer recommendations are endorsed, we do need the committee to vote on that. So in essence, you're endorsing what Tom has said and what's in the paper. It's probably best that we move forward with the vote, given what the chair has said about the decision pathway. But then, of course, the full approach will come back, and we'll make sure that that's outlined and the process on voting is clearer in that situation.
Endorse what?
So that's the question. Well, I mean, I think the idea is that we're being asked to endorse the approach as laid out in the paper and as sort of expanded on verbally by Tom. Completely understand that members may feel that they just haven't got enough information in order to be able to, to vote yes, vote yes or no on that. In which case, I mean, abstention is always an option. With that in mind, is that all right if we proceed in that way? Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. So I'll do it in reverse order then. So first of all, I'd like us to note recommendations 3 and 4, which is note the revisions to the private housing enforcement and that a new civil penalty policy will also need to be undertaken in light of new guidance which has been published, and to note that work has started on drafting a new civil penalty policy for deciding the amount of penalties for housing related offences, and public consultation is planned in spring of this year, and a further report would be brought back to committee in relation to this. Now let's move on to the request for endorsement. So the recommendations are that the committee endorses the approach as set out in the report to continue to understand government guidance and prepare for implementation of the Renters' Rights Act 2025, and endorse the approach to recommence the development of the private rented sector strategy on the basis of this regulatory and legal framework. So I'd like to move those recommendations, and could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jerome.
Would you be happy to... I think we should vote on them separately.
Oh, okay. Yep, absolutely. That's fine. Okay, so let's take separate votes on 1 and 2 then. So first of all, can we have a seconder for each? Oh, okay. So I'll need a seconder for each one in that case, I'm told. So who would like to second recommendation 1? Got Lisa, and Jerome's already indicated he'd like to recommend. Would like to second. So we've got. So I have a seconder for the first recommendation, which is to endorse the approach to continue to understand government guidance and prepare for implementation of the Renters' Rights Act 2025. Can I have votes for that recommendation then, please? Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then the second recommendation, which is to endorse the approach to recommence the development of the private rented sector strategy. Can I have votes for that? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And votes against? Got none. And abstentions? I've got 4. Okay, thank you.
And I know that was started under the previous administration, not trying to take points or anything like that, but we're now asking for the recommencing of that. So does that mean it was stopped?
Yeah, it was paused previously.
So it was paused?
Awaiting the new legislation.
Right, okay.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, is it all right if I'm so sorry to do this to everyone, can we just have like a 3-minute adjournment so I can speak with my colleagues?
I don't think there's any other business to conclude now. We've finished with the recommendations for the last item, so I think we're done with the meeting actually.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so both of those recommendations have passed. And that is the end of the meeting. The next Homes and Housing Delivery Committee meeting will take place at 10 a.m. on Friday the 10th of April. Thank you, everybody.